FF. Lunch was all ambulance. Home was alive with activity, kids running and playing. It was a warm California afternoon and a fun break from elementary school in my hometown of Illinois. Our vacation was filled with adventure, fun, the Golden Gate Bridge, the Napa wineries, and boat rides on the bay. Today was different. The peaceful calm and fun of families getting together would soon turn into a horror that would change our lives forever. Dad made a KFC run. Mom was gossiping with her friends while my younger sister and I attempted to be a part of the young boys club, attempting to start their go-kart and ride up the streets of the suburb. Damn, how I wanted to do that. My big wheel training would certainly provide me with the skills to drive a go-kart, wouldn't it? My sister continued to bug me. She was only 2, hanging on my shirt, grabbing my hand to hold it. Get off. I wanted to drive that go-kart. This was the early 1970s. Seatbelts? Who needs them? A bike helmet? What's that? Of course a go-kart would be no problem. I waited anxiously. Alas, this should have been my story of injury death. It was not. We were getting hungry, food on the way. My sister and I standing in the kitchen, she continued to grab my hand, and I continued to shake her off. Lunch was almost ready. Dad was on his way back, soon to return with his beloved extra crispy legs and mashed potatoes, a love that would endure 50 years hence. My sister and I stood in the kitchen, her small hand still seeking mine, when a scream shattered the afternoon. No! 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 My mother ran in, then out, then in again. Everyone rushed from the house. Through the chaos of shouted voices. Call an ambulance. My sister and I remained frozen in the kitchen, her hand finally finding mine as she began to cry. My dad came back with a full bucket of chicken. It was a lost bucket, dropped, chicken legs tumbled on the kitchen floor. My 3-year-old brother had fallen into the backyard swimming pool. By 1 a.m., in the Novato hospital, the doctor had come into our room with the news. My brother had died. No one slept. Chapter 1. The flight back to O'Hare was excruciatingly long and very, very quiet. Dad tried to be strong, consoling his weeping wife, but her head was turned to look out the small, oval window of the 727. I couldn't feel her pain then, only a cloud of darkness that seemed to envelop everything like the droning hum of the jet engines. My sister slept while I watched my parents across the aisle, still wondering what actually happened. My brother isn't really dead, right? At 5 years old, I couldn't comprehend death. I wouldn't understand that kind of sorrow, the feeling that your lungs and spine were being ripped from your body, until I was 40 with kids of my own. Our recovery was long and difficult. Life in Palatine continued, but differently now. The suburban streets were the same, freshly paved, lined with newly built homes, punctuated by new construction, but they felt quieter somehow. The neighborhood kids felt the darkness too, and asked, "Where's Davy?" Filling our backyard swimming pool with the garden hose, I shrugged my shoulders. He's dead. My big wheel still carried me in loops around the neighborhood, its plastic wheels grinding against the pavement and catching in the softened summer tar. Riding in the middle of the suburban streets of Pepper Tree Farms, legs spinning at unreal speeds, feeling the rush of the ground as my amazing speeds paced the cars behind me at an incomprehensible 5 miles per hour. The drivers seeing me slowed, maybe angry, asking themselves, "Where is his mother?" Despite the holiday of despair, I still had to go to school. I wanted to only lay in Mom's warm arms and be there for her while she cried every day. Dad would eventually have to go back to work. He flew for Delta and to some extent found some comfort in the front of his 727, his mind finally able to redirect itself to flight plans and procedures and gain some peace as his plane lifted off the ground. Hope and sanity up here, death and despair down there. Dad was at work, Mom was at home. I was sent to school with a, "It's all right, honey, don't worry, I have your sister." Some routines remained unchanged. I'd still meander home from Lincoln Elementary, my oversized Star Wars lunchbox swinging like a pendulum in my small hand, marking my progress by familiar landmarks. The crossing guard on Thackeray Drive with their bright orange vest, the house with the blue shutters, the yard with the bird bath. The golden retriever still waited faithfully behind his fence, pressing against the chain links for his daily ear scratch by me as I walked by. I'd sit with him, pet him, and talk to him. Somehow, this was better than what was waiting for me at home. My life was returning to normal, but Mom's wasn't and really never did. For her, normal was an insult to the memory of her son, and she didn't want to let that go. Now, over 50 years later, when Dad and I visit his burial site, I bring 2 beers, one for me and one for David, and set his on the stone. I imagine the conversations we might have had about our wives, our jobs, our lives. I take a sip of my beer, raise it to the sky. I'm sure we would have enjoyed these together. Chapter 2. I woke up to shouts and screaming. It was my parents. They were yelling something incomprehensible, but they sounded furious. I walked out of my bedroom, groggy in my Star Wars pajamas, to the hallway, and saw them in my sister's room with rage in their voices. Our home was an open floor plan with vaulted ceilings and an open stairwell. To my right were cabinets no more than 3 feet high that held sheets and towels, and to the right of that was the stairwell that plummeted down to the landing. My sister had once slid down the banister, slipped and fell, and broke her arm as she cracked into the opposing banister. But tonight she was in her room, in a small bed, innocent, young, blonde hair and blue eyes. And my parents were furious. They saw me in the hallway and looked at me. Evil in their eyes, anger like I'd never seen before. They bared their teeth, white, demonic, inhuman, and started to come towards me. What did I do wrong? Their hands outstretched and running at me. I jumped up and crawled my way to the top of the cabinets, and just before they could grab me, I jumped off the landing 6 feet below. I fell, but never hit. I hovered, watched my parents round the turn, and raced downstairs after me. I pushed off the wall and drifted over the landing and hovered over the living room. I could see the fireplace, the blue sofa, Dad's big-ass speakers, and console TV. There was also this terrifying, ugly, black velvet picture of a matador fighting a bull. The picture was huge, and it hung on the wall by the front door. I continued to drift as my parents swiped at my pajamas, trying to grab me, teeth shining bright, anger in their eyes, no words, no logic, no love. I tried to fly higher, but I was caught in an inversion where dreams met fear. Fear pushed me down, my parents below me, snapping their teeth, jumping higher and higher until snap. I was caught. I woke up in a sweat, my bedroom dark, grabbed my teddy bear and lay in the room, eyes open, but the nightmare was still going. I just didn't know it. I got out of bed and walked to the bathroom to get some water. Behind me, a closet, dark and deep, endless blackness, something lurking. I turned on the light switch. In a flash, the bulb popped. Darkness, my eyes adjusting to see in the mirror. Behind me, glowing eyes and dark black claws reaching out. My body went cold, and I woke up in bed again, still feeling the electricity of fear flowing through my arms and legs. Is it over? I removed the covers from my head, and the morning light, white, blinding me as I tried to open my eyes and let them adjust. It was a new day. The crackle of the 45 RPM record of my Fisher-Price stereo introduced my waking time. The music of Seals and Crofts' Summer Breeze lit up the room along with the morning light as I got ready for another day of summer in Palatine. I retired my big wheel, its plastic wheels now thinned and hole-ridden from countless miles and skids from the spin-out handbrake. But my new Schwinn Stingray, with playing cards affixed by clothespins to snap by the chrome spokes, its elongated banana seat and riser handlebars, propelled me into adventures further from home than I could have achieved with my big wheel. When I wasn't out front setting up cinderblock ramps and trying to jump over and clear my 3 best friends, Ronnie, Scotty, and Ricky, sometimes unsuccessfully, I was out exploring the neighborhood that was still under construction. My 7-year-old legs spinning like crazy on this heavy-ass steel bike would carry me from home into the unknown depths of open space. Fields of tall grasses and paths so thin that willows and ferns would slap my skinny bare legs as I rode through. Blinded by the tall grass, only a few feet of path was visible, and at times disappeared completely, leaving me lost like in the depths of Halloween's corn mazes. Grass slapping me, leaving red marks on my legs and stickers stuck in my knee-high tube socks. I'd break out into the open hole of a large foundation project being constructed. In a few years' time, this would turn into a Palatine eyesore, a large 10-story towering condominium complex in a town whose biggest structure was a water tower. But for now, it was a giant hole made to ride. Kids from all over the neighborhood would gather here, dirty and bloody. They'd ride, plunging into the pit, sometimes from sheer cliffs, racing into the pit and finding dirt mounds to jump. Crashes, blood, laughter, and damn, "You okay?" emanated from the pit. Nothing but laughter during a time when GPS, AP pins, and helicopter parents hadn't been invented yet. But even daredevils need fuel. Scraped knees and dirt-covered faces wouldn't keep my bike and I from our next mission. Hunger erupted, onward to the next destination. A rock candy store just a couple of miles away, through more dirt trails and high grass that eventually merged to a groomed trail leading to the mall with Barrow's Pizza, rock candy, and my mom's knitting supply store. Barrow's was the best pizza in the world. Thick, doughy crust rose by days of yeast growth. You could smell the fermentation from the kitchen, the pizza covered in bright red sauce and cheeses. The crust would bubble, so high you could almost pop it. And this place had video games. I was no noob. With my Pong console at home, I knew how to game, and Barrow's had the vintage classic, Seawolf. The only dilemma was I never had money. Rock candy in hand, I rode back home, where sweet moments of childhood freedom often collided with deeper currents of loss and consequence. The Davy tree was a gift that my best friend, Ricky's mom, gave us in solidarity to the loss of my brother. She explained that a tree is a great way to memorialize losses because you are planting life. It was a great gesture, and while in the moment it felt hollow, it was planted in our backyard at the foot of the deck that my dad built. Our backyard represented a Norman Rockwell picture of small-town, suburban life. There were no fences dividing property lines, only low shrubs, and we would run from backyard to backyard shooting cap guns, playing tag, and tackling each other. Grass stains covered everything. The large weeping willow in the corner of the yard attracted fireflies by the hundreds, and we'd catch them and keep them in mason jars. In the winter, a small pool of water that was always near the willow would freeze, and we'd skate on it. Later, I learned that the neighborhood had some serious water problems that nearly condemned our home, but we made the best of it. After a day of play, we'd sit on the deck, look at Davy's tree, and eat barbecue hot dogs. This seemingly utopian childhood would be thrown into chaos. My friend Ronnie and I went to visit Ricky, and when we discovered he wasn't home, we snuck into the backyard and smashed all of his mom's flower planters. Broken clay pots covered the backyard walkway. Dirt splayed across the patio like bomb holes in a war zone. Wilted remains of flowers and vegetables lay dead like soldiers in a field of battle. Ricky's mom came over to our home wearing thick sunglasses to hide her tears. She had forgiven me. I was a child, and my lost brother earned me leniency. But my conscience suffered every time I watched the Davy tree bloom, knowing that I destroyed life and hurt my best friend's mom. But that didn't slow me down. Once again, Ronnie took me by the hand and led me to the house across the street this time. It was recently purchased and was still being built. New drywall and paint. The yard hadn't been landscaped, and there were chunks of mud and dirt clusters all over. The hill behind the house of fresh excavation tailings provided even more ammunition for Ronnie and I. We slid open the backyard patio door and proceeded to bombard the interior with mud and rocks and dirt. The walls became painted with dark brown splatters of mud, oozing and dripping from its splatter point down the walls. One mud ball stuck to the ceiling, and we laughed, and whoa! We snuck away secure in the idea that we were Renaissance artists free from the consequences of the Catholic Church and free to express our artistic blasphemy. We were caught, and my parents were furious. I was outside playing in my sandbox, and my dad grabbed my arm and pulled me up to my feet and dragged me into the house. My mom yelled, "Why would you do that?" I remember my nightmare suddenly. A police officer stood at the front door. He said in a deadpan voice, "Son, you're going to jail." Above the door, and to the right of the cop loomed that ugly black velvet picture. The bull looked angry as the matador casually stepped away. I am the bullfighter, I thought. You are under arrest for the vandalism of property, the officer calmly explained. I'm taking you and Ricky to jail. I don't want to go to jail. I'm sorry. It was an accident, I pleaded. I was crying as the officer took me by the hand and carefully moved me to the back seat of the patrol car, lights flashing under a warm sunset sky. Ronnie was already in the back seat. He was crying too. It was a long ride to the Palatine jail. The sounds of radio chatter making the event terrifyingly real. This wasn't a dream. I'm bringing in 2 minors on a 10:35, the officer said. The radio squelched. Roger that, Barry. The cells are unlocked and waiting. We arrived, terrified. Ronnie asked the officer in his most delicate, sweet voice, Mister, can we stay in the same cell, please? The cell door closed, our little hands hanging on the thick cold bars, crying 7-year-old tears. We're convicts. A few moments later, lectured by the police and finally driven back home, my mom opened the door. She'd been crying. I walked in and hugged her. The large open ceilings, our blue sofa, Dad's big-ass speakers, and a giant velvet picture felt warm to the heart. I think our family learned something that day. Our nightmares don't define reality as much as they paint a picture of observations that we can't identify. My freedoms were manifestations of the distances I felt between my parents and of me. My mother's sadness, a demon that I could not control, nor the demon between my parents preventing them from finding love again. I realize now, decades later and consequences lived, my calls for attention, ignored by nightmares and relinquished by freedoms, coalesced like a thick scab into that one moment, in Mom's arms, when what I wanted was forgiveness for the death of my little brother. Chapter 3. The song behind Mission Impossible, I'll Wait for You. Can you hear it? I stealthily snuck around to the front of the bus as the other kids were waiting to get on. My brown pants and yellow polo didn't make things easier. No one saw me. I looked left and right, attendants walking the parking lot making sure kids were in line and orderly. It was clear, holding my breath and making a dash for it. I ran across the lot and hid in the trees, heart beating, trying to silence my breathing. It was a fall day, and the yellow and orange leaves camouflaged me perfectly. I waited quietly until the buses left and attendants went back inside St. Teresa's School for wayward boys and girls. Today was the day I'd meet my new, incredibly cute girlfriend, and we'd walk home together. Theme song continues. After having acclimated to Lincoln Elementary School, my dad thought it was time to switch me over to Catholic school. I was getting into fights and had earned a reputation with the teachers and administration as a troublemaker. The 2 girlfriends that I had in 4th grade probably didn't help my reputation much. But I was popular and felt great, so the shock of moving to a new school was disappointing. Structure, discipline, and tough old nuns should help me to become the step-forward child my dad wanted. Theme song still playing. I raced to the side of the school and stayed hidden in the trees. This is where she'd meet me. In all fairness, I did ask the attendants once if I could simply walk home instead of taking the bus. I wanted to spend some time with Julie, hopefully hand in hand, and walk home. It was only a couple of miles away, and we were in 5th grade. What's wrong with that? Julie and I stole glances between the pews during Mass. We'd smile at each other, she'd giggle. In her yellow blouse and brown skirt, such a cutie, short hair, brown eyes, she reminded me of Nadia Kamenecki. Alas, after waiting in the bushes, she never showed up. Her stealthiness hadn't evolved yet, or she was just a good kid. I made my way home walking along the sidewalks, feet crunching in fallen red and yellow leaves, a moment that has never quite recreated itself. This was my town. I owned it. New school or not. I was at home, friends in the neighborhood, and a girlfriend at school. Retracing my bike route, stopped for more rock candy, and arrived home in time for Spider-Man and Mom's PB&J. But these moments of ownership and contentment would soon go into spin mode before tumble drying. My life had moved on and I was happy, but Mom's clung to the past, and her depression raised itself in allergies, red eyes, and sneezing. It got worse over the last few years. She'd look in the playroom where Davy and I played with Tinker toys, admire the paintings she created of Pinocchio and Donald Duck on the wall, and her allergies would act up. She'd see the room where Davy slept, and her eyes would redden and she'd sneeze. His old clothes sat in the closet in a plastic bag that could never seem to find its way to charity. Mom was miserable, Dad's marriage on the rocks, choices to be made. By January 1978, we moved to Evergreen, Colorado. I said goodbye to my Catholic schoolgirl friend, packed my clothes and Fisher-Price stereo, and before I knew it, I was living in a small mountain town about an hour from Denver. We made Colorado a winter vacation destination. Flying into the old Denver airport in a Pinto rental with a window that never closed, we'd drive 3 hours through snowstorms into the high Rocky Mountains, destination Steamboat Springs, Colorado, and ski. Mom with her fluffy yellow hat, tight-fitting colorful down jacket and ski pants, her mission, to go downhill and look good. She'd never take risks. She wanted to look pretty. Guys would ooh and ah as she wiggled her way elegantly down the slope. Dad, on the other hand, looked like a turtle with 2 poles. Arms outstretched, legs open, and slowly making turns that would crisscross the entire slope. Every turn calculated, stiff and relentless, following Mom like a 3-legged dog. Me? I had a silver helmet, and the helmet was put there for a very good reason. I didn't turn, I could, but I didn't. These were blue runs, blue so Mom could look good, so Dad could survive it, and I just pointed my skis down and went. I met Mom at the bottom of the hill to wait in the lift line. You know, honey, if you yell single really loud, usually someone up front will let you ride the chair with them. She looked among the crowd, men in cowboy hats and form-fitting jeans, men in their puffer jackets and tight ski pants. You can also tell a good skier by the way they stand in line. She said and smiled as Dad came lumbering down the hill like a slow-moving tractor. Single, I called and went to the front of the line. The town of Evergreen was a huge departure from the suburbs of Chicago. Unlike the many paths and suburban labyrinths providing multiple options to explore and get from A to B, Evergreen was nestled in the mountains, bound by 2 creeks with a large lake. The roads were like veins going off in one direction, winding through hills and valleys seemingly forever. There was one road to town, and it was a narrow road, more like a highway with lots of traffic and nowhere to walk or ride. Evergreen is an iconic western town reminiscent of the Wild West movies with shootouts in the street. Authentic old wooden buildings, a wooden plank for a sidewalk connecting stores, restaurants, and bars. Instead of horses tied up front, Harleys were perched outside, lined in a long row, waiting for their owners. Whips hanging from handlebars, bright shiny chrome, and men in jeans and chaps. Long hair and bandanas mixing it up with the cowboys in the Little Bear Saloon. Little Bear is the city's anchor, drawing people from all over for live music, good food, and beer. A swinging bar door up front that squeaks when you open it. Inside was a noisy ruckus. People laughing, talking, yeehaw, beer glasses clinking, and creaky wooden planks with rusted nails, etched names, and "I love pussy" carved into the old wooden posts. Welcomed you inside. They had pizza, but it was no Barrows. In January, the Evergreen Lake was frozen solid. On top were tractors to groom the ice for skaters. A smaller circular skateway was smoothed by the side of the lake as hundreds gathered there to skate. Music would play from speakers outside the warming hut. Several small restaurants dotted Evergreen, but, unlike Palatine, nothing was central. More veiny roads to drive to get from one restaurant to another or one store to another. Everything was so far apart, the old Schwinn would never cover that ground. But, in a way, this brought our family a little closer. We were isolated in our small wooden house on 1 acre of property covered with snow and pine trees, until we all decided to go out as a family. And of course, with any move for a child, there's a new school to attend, new teachers, new students, new friends. But entering into school in the middle of the year left few opportunities for friendship. And there were no kids anywhere near us. I'd walk to school, a mile each way along lonely dirt roads, no dogs to pet, and no candy shops. I was beginning to feel very claustrophobic when, during the summer of 1978, Steve moved in next door. Steve was like an oasis in the desert, the cold part of a pillow on a hot day. He moved in next door. If I threw a rock hard enough, I might get it to the yard. Steve was this skinny, nerdy little kid. He had a funny, breathy laugh. It was enchanting. He had just moved up from Denver and would talk about his adventures there. We had something in common other than our exact ages. Summer in Colorado is something very special. The air is fresh and clean, the grass green, the sky forever blue except for the afternoon thunderstorms. Colors were vivid and bright and alive. I had only seen Colorado in the winter until that summer, and evergreens simply came alive. The sound of gravel under our feet and fishing poles in one hand, a bucket in the other. "How do you like the school here?" Steve asked. I scuffed my penny loafers in the dirt, watching pebbles scatter. "It's okay. Better than nuns, I bet." His eyes sparkled with mischief. "They weren't that bad," I mumbled, just kind of loud sometimes. "Praise Jesus," he suddenly bellowed, making me jump. Then he looked down at my feet and started laughing. "What in God's name are those on your feet?" I felt my face flush. "Penny loafers. They're from my old school." "Oh, Paul, you sweet summer child," he grinned, shaking his head. "You need boots out here in the Wild West. Or at least some tennis shoes." "I don't have any," I admitted. "We had a dress code at St. Teresa's." Steve's laugh was infectious. Not mocking, but genuinely delighted by the absurdity of penny loafers on a fishing expedition. We perched ourselves on the Evergreen Lake Dam, the concrete wall. Water rushed over the top and made a soothing noise. Looking down into the water, the trout were just sitting there. I impaled the fish eggs to my hook and dipped it in the water, and my pole tugged almost immediately. "Holy shit, that was easy," I said. The fish fought me as I unhooked it and put it in our water bucket. "Yeah, my brother and I found this spot a few days ago." "Yeah. What's your brother's name?" I asked. "David." "Oh, I had a brother David. He died when I was little." The words hung in the air between us. The rush of water over the dam seemed louder somehow. Steve's fishing line dipped slightly into current while mine stayed perfectly still. Finally, he looked at me sideways, a gentle smirk forming. "I wish mine would die." He smiled, and I knew this was his way of trying to make me feel better. We could just sit together and say nothing after that. We knew what each was thinking until, "Get off the dam." We looked across the lake to see a cop, lights on with his bullhorn. "Get off the dam now," he commanded. I grabbed my bucket of 6 trout, slipped on my loafers, and we scuttled off the dam, hid behind a tree, and when the cop left, made our way back. This was our spot, isolated about a 15-minute drive and a 30-minute hike. Unless he was a great swimmer, we were safe. That summer was a honeymoon with Steve, from our fishing adventures to walking along the creek into downtown Evergreen to play at the Bijou Arcade, then stroll to the record shop and browse albums we couldn't afford. But summer ended and school started. We walked all summer, getting to know each other, enjoying our company and adventures, but the walk to school seemed long. Our first day in school resulted in a failed attempt to pretend that Steve was in my homeroom. After a few days, the teacher caught on and moved Steve into another class. But there was a new kid in class. His hair was so red, it looked like strings of curly fries trying to escape his skull. He was a pale kid, always with a shit-eating grin on his face and the obligatory freckles. He loved to crack jokes in class, but they came out awkward, and the other kids just put their hands to their cheeks like horse blinders. I felt sorry for him and introduced myself. "Hey, new kid. I'm Paul." Brian spun around in his chair, that wild red hair catching the fluorescent lights. "Bra little Merkel, måste have desisted." He grinned wide enough to distort his freckles like stars swirling around a black hole. "Did you see that kid pick his nose earlier? I thought he was going for goal," pointing out our resident bully, Scott Dunbar. I glanced nervously at Dunbar's desk. Maybe keep it down." "Keep it down? Why?" "He can't hear us over the sound of his own breathing." Brian demonstrated with an exaggerated mouth-breathing impression. "Besides, what's he going to do? Sit on us?" Despite myself, I snickered. His complete lack of filter was both terrifying and fascinating. Scott looked over at us and frowned. He didn't hear us. I didn't think so, at least. I introduced Brian to Steve, and we quickly became good friends, playground buddies, making popsicle stick grenades and launching ourselves off the swing set to create new world records. One day, minding our own business, Scott came lumbering up to us. As he approached, he got bigger, shading the sun behind him like an eclipse made of sweatpants and intimidation. We were having too much fun, and in hindsight, he probably just wanted to hang out with us. I never saw him with friends. His size and demeanor was intimidating. Yush is a bunch of fuggots, you know, he said. Brian looked at me. What the fuck did he say? I don't know. I was a skinny, 50-pound kid, ready to blow away with a stiff breeze, looking up to this hulking sixth grader who was smelling blood. Fuck Yush. Yush a little pussy, Dunbar said, getting right into Brian's face. Brian was no taller than me, nor any meteor. Steve was minding his own business, swinging back and forth, preparing to launch himself. Iber isbo skot bu duba. Brian fired back, his freckles dancing with delight. Mybu headbu isbu smallbu, and mybu belly isbu hugebu. Brian looked at Scott, his face in a cynical grin, no fear. Brian's red curls practically sparked with electricity as he stood his ground. Scott turned around and walked away. Steve launched into the sand and created a long jump record. We laughed, and from there, Dunbar talk was invented. The language was very intricate with its own structure and syntax. We became so proficient at Dunbar speak that it became a coded language. Aben, Brian said. Abn. Steve said. Abn Paulba. Brian said. Abn. I said, and we'd laugh. You had to be there, I suppose. Poor Scott. From that day on, Dunbar speak became our secret weapon. Our private code that turned potential threats into inside jokes and confused the shit out of anyone who dared to mock us. Steve, Brian, and I cemented our relationship, and over the weekends we practically lived together, spending nights. Back then, these were sleepovers. Going on hikes, exploring the mountains, and sneaking into Brian's dad's office to steal bits of wires and wire nuts to create our pocket pal, a small humanoid figure that would pinch to our clothes and join us on our adventures. One such bit of fun was removing red ants from ant hills and dumping them on the black ant hill and watch the chaos ensue. We were mountain boys in a mountain town with only so many things to do. Up in Brian's room, Supertramp's Breakfast in America filled the air while we pursued our separate obsessions. Me adjusting my pocket pal's wire limbs, Steve programming his toy truck for bathroom navigation, and Brian practicing his cowboy swagger in front of the mirror. Howdy, partner. Does this hat make me look rugged? Boys, turn on the TV. The urgency in Brian's mother's voice from downstairs made us freeze. Brian clicked on the small black and white set, its weak signal providing a glimpse of the action, but the words came through clear enough. President Reagan has been shot. The reporter announced as the images on the TV showed Secret Service swarming and tackling the president into the car. Ronald Reagan was leaving the Washington Hilton Hotel after giving a speech to a union group when John W. Hinckley Jr. opened fire from his .22 caliber revolver. At the sound of the gunshots, Secret Service agents swarmed, and one of them shoved the president into the waiting limousine, but not before one of the bullets struck home, hitting Reagan in his side. We watched nervously, days later discovering that Hinckley had done it for actress Jodie Foster. We heard she posed nude for High Society magazine in 1982 and tried desperately to get our hands on one. Our friendship continued to bloom while my parents had their own little project. I was happy in my world, speaking a language no one understood, hiking hills where no one could find us, and throwing snowballs at unknowing cars. My parents, meanwhile, decided to build a 5,000-square-foot mansion on 32 acres in a county 10 long miles away from everything I knew. The realtor's car crept up the dirt road until trees blocked our path completely. Well, this is it, she announced cheerfully. We stepped from her luxury car with its leather seats and cloud-like suspension into what looked like pure wilderness. Just trees. Endless trees. Where are we? I asked, but Mom was already explaining their grand vision while Dad paced the forest floor, counting steps, planning a driveway through the entanglement of pine and brush. We pushed our way through dense undergrowth for what felt like miles until suddenly the forest opened up. The Continental Divide stretched across the horizon, Mt. Evans towering above everything. Oh my God, it's gorgeous, Mom exclaimed. Dad shot her a warning look. Showing too much enthusiasm would cost us at closing. But it was too late. Mom turned to us, to Dad. Don't you think this is amazing? The deal was already done. Dad had lost his leverage, and I had lost my argument against leaving everything I loved behind. Looking back 40 years later, I realize how little power and control we have over our lives. Mom wanted control of her sadness by escaping into a wilderness, pretending that her old life never happened, eventually getting what she wanted. Dad wanted power over love, the love of his wife, the love of his family, by sacrificing the places he called home, not realizing that these choices didn't change the void from the absence of his own self-love. I wanted personal power, to feel comfortable with who I was growing into, to have friends, and to lift my timidity and exercise confidence, and chase away the growing fear I was feeling as life kept throwing curveballs. But with each iteration, control was removed until it was completely gone, submersing me into a dark space where the monster in the closet pulled me in its death grip, callous black hands with razors for nails. And this time, there was no waking up. Chapter 4. The hum of Delta Flight 1089, a Lockheed L-10-11 TriStar with 3 powerful jet engines en route to Chicago, blended into the background as we approached O'Hare. I pressed my face to the window, taking in Chicago's endless grid of lights and highways stretching to the horizon. The darkened cabin, lit only by floor strips, mirrored the city's dotted landscape below. This was one of many flights with Dad. He would often take me on work trips with him, and he loved the company. For Dad, having me along meant bridging his 2 lives, the one at 35,000 feet and the one at home. These trips let him be both pilot and father at once. I never appreciated the first-class seats and hot towels with 3-course dinners. For me, this was routine, and I deserved them for being the captain's son. Flying with Dad was a formal occasion that required a jacket and tie. Sometimes I'd splash on a little of Dad's cologne to make me feel older. Sitting in the window seat, smelling and looking good, an attractive stewardess wearing a tight-fitting vest and short skirt approached me and asked, "Would you like to go into the cockpit with your dad?" Cockpit! I giggled to myself. The cockpit was Dad's office, checklist in hand, approach charts and IFR flight plans in the hands of the 3 pilots. The cabin was dark, illuminated by a red light, and the panel with so many lights and instruments dazzled my eyes. I love the lights. Up front, the hum of the gyros changed the pitch of the engine, sounds creating a new environment exclusive from the one in first class. There was another pitch change when you walked to the back with the common folk. The sound of the radio squelching with the tower communicating with other airplanes created a movie scene environment reminiscent of Star Wars, and the final scene, with the X-Wing fighters attacking the Death Star. As we approached O'Hare, the captain of that flight made his announcement, "Flight crew, prepare for landing." On this trip, Dad was next to me. The ground got closer and thump. The roar of the engine and squeak of the brakes slowed us to a stop and safely took us to our gate. Dad and I were back in Chicago. He had been using the old '72 Buick Skylark here because he was based in Chicago. But this trip, we were here to pick it up and drive to Colorado. He had moved his base to Dallas/FT Worth, and today would be his last official stop in Chicago. I could tell he was emotional about it. He loved this place. We walked out of the terminal and were hit with a blast of Arctic Chicago wind. It was cold. The parking lot had piles of snow, and the sound of tires rolling through the slush made winter that much more tangible. The Buick was freezing and struggled to start. Dad tried several times when finally the V8 engine ignited and roared to life. Before driving home, we visited Davy's grave and, of course, Jimmy's hot dogs. I got the Italian beef sandwich, wet and juicy. Then, in the morning, hit Interstate 80 for a long drive home. Rows and rows of corn passed us by. Oh, look, an overpass. I thought, mildly excited by seeing something other than an endless straight road. More corn rose as Interstate 80 relentlessly plowed through farmlands. I looked back down at the game in my hands. My Mattel electronic football chirped quietly as I guided the single red dot through the defense. Hours on Interstate 80 disappeared into that dim screen. Each touchdown a silent victory as I hunched over the game, thumbs working the directional buttons raw, lost in my own private championship. "Would you put that thing away?" Dad asked. The nation's 55-mile-per-hour speed limit made our journey painfully slow. Dad pushed it to 60, but the miles crawled by. I'm bored, I complained, staring out the window. Mom had encouraged this trip, believing father-son time would help us connect. With his work schedule, 4 days flying, 3 days home, mostly spent doting on my sister, Christine, Mom probably figured 3 days trapped together would explain why she would eventually leave him. Spend some time with your son, Ted, she'd argued. I didn't blame him for wanting to drive alone. My 14-year-old self, lost in video games and daydreams, only confirmed his fears that nobody loved him. Somewhere near Des Moines, I got tired of the game. Dad sighed. You know, when I was a kid, we didn't have these games. We read a book or did nothing. His voice attempted to sound encouraging, rising and falling to sell his point. Oh, I said, cheeks smashed against the cold window. Growing up in Chicago, you had to be tough. I was skinny, but picking up pins in the bowling alley made my stomach strong. When my bullies tried to punch me, they said, "Oh my God, his stomach feels like steel." I looked out the window. In the Air Force, I had this black guy as my sergeant. This was before racism. There was no racism. That's a bunch of malarkey, and he made me clean the potatoes, but we liked each other. The passing corn and my dad's stories had a lot in common. I met your mom in the swimming pool at Hamilton Air Force Base. We bumped heads. Mom said that she looked 14, didn't have boobs, and wondered why you liked her. I said, well, I didn't know how old she was. I didn't even like her until I found out that she was in high school. After we got married, we moved to Las Vegas. She wrecked my convertible. By the way, Mom isn't a very good driver. She wasn't. One time she snuck into my barracks, and when the captain came up to the room, she hid behind the curtain. But the captain saw her feet. He looked at me and said, "Gallas, your room is spotless. Make sure it's also empty in 20 minutes. I said, "Yes, sir." Phew, that was a pressure cooker. These stories went on, mile after mile, corn row after corn row, until we stopped for gas. We pulled off the highway in Kearney, Nebraska, filled the tank at $1 per gallon, and went inside to pay for it. Yes, there once was a time when the gas was pumped before we paid for it. Inside, under the hum of the fluorescent lights, there was a magazine rack. I want to look at the latest issue of Mad Magazine, but the top row caught my eye. The magazines were all covered, and I couldn't see the content. So I pulled the cover forward to reveal a woman with her legs spread wide open, advertising her very hairy private place with a light pink spot in the middle. I gulped, felt my face go hot, and in the split second it took me to tumble the cover forward, I put it back just before Dad had seen what I saw. He laughed. "Real women don't do that," he said, and that was the last I heard about that. But in that flash of time, that split second, a lot of data was collected in my brain that would never go away, obviously. The endless rows of corn gradually gave way to the rolling prairies of eastern Colorado. Finally, the Rocky Mountains emerged on the horizon, first as dark shadows, then as towering peaks that grew larger with each mile. 3 days later, batteries dead in my game, we pulled into the driveway to our new home. The clearing had transformed since summer. Piles of fallen trees lined the dirt road, future winter's worth of firewood. The old Buick lurched and bounced until we reached what would become our house. But it wasn't quite a house yet. Only the first floor stood, no roof except plywood, the exterior wrapped in foam core insulation that made it gleam like a grounded spaceship. All our summer's work, the foundation, walls, and ceiling, just enough to make the basement level livable. We rounded the front, and the contrast hit me. My sister running to hug Dad, Mom coming to embrace me, this flash of warmth against our silver shelter. The Buick sat quietly outside as snow began to fall, covering our Chicago past in mountain white. _______. Building this house was truly a family project. With only a little help from independent carpenters, we swung our own hammers, cut 2x4s and 2x6s with one skill saw, and raised the walls ourselves. But this was more than construction for my parents. It was their attempt to rebuild something broken. Mom poured herself into projects that made sure that things got finished while Dad, when he was home, obsessed over the finer planning details, measurements, angles, and approaches to completing a project. More planning than doing. Both of them trying to craft two separate goals out of raw lumber and nails. Perhaps they thought a house built by their own hands could shelter us from past losses. 9 years had passed since David's death, but time moved differently for each of us. For them, this house represented a fresh start. For me, it was an endless ordeal of midnight leaks and collapsing walls. Snowmelt dripped on my head while I slept. Rivers flowed from the ceiling into hastily placed buckets. One night, a wall we'd built crashed down in the darkness, the thunder of its fall matching the storm in my parents' marriage. At 14, I couldn't see their desperate need to create something lasting. I only knew this project was meticulously designed to ruin my life. The days would be repetitive and would go something like this. _____. The smell of fresh waffles in the kitchen woke me up. Mom was already awake preparing breakfast for my sister and me. Waffles were my favorite. She declared that the secret ingredient was sour cream. I could hear the hissing of steam as it cried out over the hot gas-lit flame under her cast iron waffle pan. We had walls, but they were only temporary, crafted from 2x4s and foam core for privacy. But we heard everything, little conversations, farts from the bathroom, everything. So, waking up to the sound of cooking became as routine as an alarm clock. My sister and I were sharing the same room, 2 beds side by side, 2 dresser drawers side by side. On top of my drawers, my new stereo, my dad's hand-me-down Marantz, and a turntable. Eddie Murphy's Delirious on the turntable, rotating and skipping because it came to the end sometime after I had fallen asleep. To the left of my bed, the concrete wall we just poured over the summer and a small egress. And just on top of the wall, hidden behind the silver insulation foam, and in reach from both my bedroom and the bathroom with an adjoining wall, my stash of Penthouse and Playboy magazines. These needed to be accessible from the bathroom to avoid any further complications from shaking the bed next to me. Breakfast is ready. My mom didn't yell it, she'd almost sing it. We sat at the kitchen bar as she served us our waffles. This might look like any other kitchen and dining room, carpeted floors with the modern amenities of home. If you could filter out the bucket strewn over the floor, exposed 2x8 ceiling joists and insulation instead of drywall. Breakfast was a time that brought the warmth of family together. From the smells of fresh cooked food to the brewing of coffee, it created a harmony. But with each bite of my waffle, I was one bite closer to having to start my life. One bite closer to leaving the warmth of home and going out into the cold, difficult world, alone with my fears and demons. As the waffle shrunk, my anxiety grew. I didn't want to leave. The morning warmth of the home made the cold reality of school even harder to face. Mom would take my sister to elementary school, the same place where Steve and Brian and I had built our friendship. But they, like myself, had started junior high. Unlike them, I was shuttled into the Clear Creek School District. My school was in Idaho Springs, Colorado. Idaho Springs made Evergreen look like a big city. It was and still is a small mountain town, another hour west on I-70, built from its huge gold mine that dominated the downtown's non-existent skyline. The town, by most standards, was very charming with a quaint Western mystique straight out of the 1800s. Downtown was adorned with country shops, a small grocery store, a 2-lane bowling alley, and a Bo Joe's Pizza that came very close to Barrows and Palatine. They also had a video game, Space Invaders. I lost a lot of quarters on that one. My school was brand new, a large structure that rested at the edge of town. This school enveloped all students from 7th to 12th grade. At 14 years old and 80 pounds, I felt like I was walking into the Denver Broncos locker room. Towering juniors and seniors blocking my vision from where I was trying to walk, looking down at me. Fresh meat. Their deep voices bellowed. The locker room, before PE, made it all that much worse. I had 2 bullies that I had to contend with daily. This was really bad. I couldn't sit at any table at lunch. I had to find a place outside to eat. Before PE in the locker room, during PE on the field, and after PE in the locker room, I was picked on, teased, insulted. I was punched, pinched, and prodded, hit in the face after school, and my head cracked on the cement floor, giving me a concussion, and I forgot where I was. This triggered a meeting with the school and the parents, but didn't do much to change the course of my misery. The other bully, Cody Rollins, was a nightmare. I only saw him for 1 hour a day, but that was enough. Study hall was nothing more than a room full of raging testosterone and no teacher. The worst part, both bullies in one goddamned room. Study hall should have been a break, but the empty teacher's desk meant Cody and Mike had free reign. I kept my head down, pretending to read, but I could feel them watching. The clock ticked painfully slow. "Hey, retard," Cody whispered from behind, yanking a chunk of my hair. I tensed, but didn't respond. This was his favorite game, seeing how much hair he could pull out before I'd react. Mike snickered from 2 seats over. "What's wrong? Afraid to say something?" Mike's voice dripped with mock concern. Maybe he needs to visit the nurse again. They knew about my frequent escapes to the nurse's office. It had become a joke between them, placing bets on how many times I try to leave class in a week. Cody grabbed another fistful of hair. "I heard Paula say you grabbed her tit. That true, pervert?" The accusation hung in the air. It wasn't true, but truth didn't matter. Tomorrow it would be something else, my clothes, my voice, my existence. The walls felt like they were closing in, the mountain of homework on my desk becoming a blur as I fought back tears. They were right. The nurse's office was often my escape, especially before PE, lunch, and this fucking torture chamber, study hall. The nurse was kind. I'd come in complaining of a stomach ache, and she'd let me lie down on the sterile bed. I spent hours in that room, under the hum of the fluorescent lights above, and practically memorizing the food pyramid poster hanging on the wall. "You have a lot of stomach aches. Have you gone to the doctor?" She was kind, and her tone didn't accuse me of anything. And it was true, my stomach was constantly in knots. I'd go days without taking a shit. My depression grew as each day loomed of untold tales of abuse, fear, and misery. The long bus rides to and from school were the nut toppings defining just how rotten each day was. The other students on the bus could smell blood each time I walked in the doors, each seat with a different student refusing to let me sit. They smelled my weakness and intimidation. I kept my eyes down and sat. Usually I'd find a place up front. The cool kids sat in the back. Loud, noisy teens with cowboy hats and jeans with a round were marking their back pockets from the Copenhagen chew can. Chewing tobacco defined the cowboy way. Skoal or Cope were the 2 main favorites. The odor filled the bus daily. It was nauseating. The boys in the back would see just how much spit they could add to the floor. My feet were raised, knees on the seat in front of me, so the river of saliva and snot would flow freely under me. And, of course, it wouldn't be a complete 1.5-hour bus ride without being hit in the head with a spitball. The door would finally creak open, and I'd get out of my bus stop. The bus engine roared as it continued west along Upper Bear Creek Road, eventually being silenced by the nature around me. A cold winter wind, the sound of the creek, my shoes crunching on fresh snowfall with the majestic snow-covered Mount Evans in the distance. I had a mile to walk home, uphill, both ways. There were a few ways to get home. I could follow the roads, which were further, or cut through the forest. The deep snow during winter would often challenge me beyond my limits on the steep mountainside that led to home. There was a deer path that cut through the meadow and climbed up to the house. This was a favorite route because it was marked and fairly clear of fallen trees. Mom and I, during the summer, lined the deer path with fallen aspen trees to emphasize the path. Otherwise, you would be stepping into bushes or deep pits covered by snow. The horse appeared each day, emerging from his shelter on a large grassless field as if waiting for me. His breath would burst visible in the cold air, a gentle invitation. I'd pause my trudge through the snow to pat his nose, offering handfuls of grass more for connection than sustenance. In those moments, his dark eyes held no judgment, no cruelty, just quiet understanding. Here was something large enough to hurt me, choosing kindness instead. After a day of being prey, I found comfort in this brief friendship with a gentle giant. The horse's warmth and soft nickering helped wash away the day's fears before I faced the chaos of construction at home. I arrived home to the sound of nail guns, saws, and loud banging. Upstairs, Mom and Dad would be relentlessly working and building. We also had a carpenter. His name was Paul, too. He seemed like a nice guy and would always say, "Hey there, Leopardno," with a smile and gleam in his eye. "Hey, Paul, how are you?" "Another day in paradise," he'd smile, tape measure in hand. The tape rolled and snapped back into its case. His cheerful demeanor created a pleasant short-term balance to an otherwise chaotic day. There was always work to be done. I got home at about 4:30 p.m. It was a long day. I'd start down the hill at 6:30 a.m. and get home when the sun was just going down. But I'd get to work, clearing wood scraps, sweeping loose sawdust, sucking up water from the leaks in the basement, loading scraps of wood into the back of the pickup for the next dump run, cutting 2x4s, pulling nails, until the sun had fully set and there wasn't enough light to work with. After dinner, there was a pile of homework that I was usually too tired to do. But I'd be sent to my room to do it. I'd slip on my headphones, listen to Rick Springfield's Jesse's Girl, pull out my books, my eyes would close, and soon the entire house was quiet. The next day, this would start all over again. __________________. Mom and I sat watching Love Boat on our old TV. The living room was finally taking shape, drywall up but unpainted, crown molding still in stacks along the wall. From our room came the sound of my sister's voice, tangled in the spiral cord of our rotary phone, probably talking to one of her friends from school. Paul, Mom turned to me during a commercial. I know about the bullying. Her voice was steady, the same tone she used for hard truths. You can't keep running to the nurse's office. I stared at the TV, not wanting to have this conversation. The pain of being punched, she continued, only lasts a few minutes. But what they're doing to your spirit, that will last forever if you let it. She wasn't speaking like a mother protecting her child. She was talking to me like an adult who needed to understand a harsh reality. But what if I get in trouble? I asked. Fuck that. Listen to me. She leaned forward. There's a difference between being violent and standing up for yourself. Right now, you're letting them steal pieces of who you are. Every time you run, every time you hide, they take another piece. Sometimes the only way to keep your soul intact is to show them you're willing to fight for it. I don't know how, I admitted. Yes, you do. You've been holding it back, containing it. But that anger you feel, that rage when they touch you, stop pushing it down. Let it come out. Let them see it. She turned back to the TV as Fantasy Island began. The school can call me if they want. I'd rather have a son who fought those assholes than one who lost himself in hiding. I went to sleep that night with thoughts crawling through my head. How was I going to confront these two? Would I find the courage to engage them? I knew that I had to, my stomach still in knots as I planned my fight in my head. I drifted between sleep and consciousness, my mind replaying Mom's words. The familiar darkness crept in, but this time felt different. I found myself in front of the bathroom mirror, expecting the usual terror from behind me. Instead of waking in a sweat, I turned to face it. The monster emerged, black claws and glowing eyes. But now I saw something else in those eyes, a reflection of my own rage, my own power. This wasn't my enemy. It was a part of me I'd been too afraid to embrace. Each torment, each moment of humiliation had fed it, made it stronger. Now it waited, patient, ready to serve. You've been here all along, I whispered, understanding flooding through me. The monster's mouth curved into something like a smile. Its claws extended toward me, not to harm, but to merge. The darkness wasn't something to fear. It was armor, waiting to be worn. Yes, it growled a low hiss. I've been watching you for years. Its razor-sharp teeth glistening with silvery drool. We are together. We are one. I will help you. Its voice faded in a swirling cacophony of restless sleep, finally taking me away. I woke with a strange calm. The demon hadn't left, but now it rested inside me, a coiled spring waiting for release. Today would be different. Today, the monster wouldn't be in my nightmares. It wouldn't be my bullies. Today, I was the monster. ________. Breakfast tasted a little sweeter today. The maple syrup had a warm, buttery smell, sweet, almost pungent, but delicious. Mom and I didn't say much this morning. She just looked at me and smiled, sliding my plate towards me with a fresh steaming waffle on top. My sister grabbed her fork and dug in, her blue eyes as bright as ever and long blonde hair draping over her plaid shirt. She had gone full Wrangler on me. After breakfast, I threw on my thick puffer jacket, hat and gloves, swung my backpack over my shoulder and said, "Bye, Mom." and started my hike down the bus stop. I took the short route, the steepest part of the hill down to the road. It was so steep that a jump would float you several feet down the hill. Ski team did me good. Run, plant my foot on a dry rock, launch, and soar and land in snow, hopping and jumping down the hill. My pack bounced on my back as I left a trail of disturbed snow tracks zigzagging across the hill. Plant, launch, fly, land again and again. Out of breath, steam shooting from my mouth and nose, I approached my horse friend, gave him a pat, and continued down the snow-packed dirt road. At the bottom of the hill, the sound of Bear Creek trickled under the bridge, walking across and waiting at the bus stop. Time slowed. The sound of the mountain wind, the creek, my breath. I looked west, out at the narrow, winding mountain road with snow-capped peaks, wondering what it would be like to fly up there. The snow so white, and the peaks touching the dimly lit sky as the sun was just beginning to rise behind me. It was cold. The headlights of the bus were visible in the distance, and I soon heard the engine as it became louder approaching me. The bus stopped, doors opened, and I stepped in. I took a seat, put my knees up, slipped on my Sony Walkman, and listened to Pink Floyd, Roger Waters' Agony merging to my own. I soon fell asleep as background noises from the kids in the back faded to black. If you want to find out what's behind these cold eyes, you'll just have to claw your way through this disguise. My shoulder was slammed hard from a kid walking past me and hitting it with his backpack. I woke from my sleep. We had arrived. Walking into the building, students buzzing by me, in front and to the side, seemed to exist in a different dimension, like they were a part of a universe that I did not belong to. Opening my locker and putting my books and jacket away, I went to my first class. I sat in my biology class, attentive, listening to the teacher speak and taking notes. He made eye contact with me. "Mr. Gallas," he said. I looked up. Yeah. I asked. "It's nice to see your face." He smiled. The kids giggled. I hadn't realized it, but today was the first day in his class that I wasn't either in the nurse's office or sitting there with the drawstring to my hoodie fully cinched to cover my entire face with only a peephole to see through. I smiled back, and he continued talking about photosynthesis. The day was, for the most part, actually uneventful. Lunch came and went, and when the bell rang, I didn't really think this through, but I was on my way to study hall. Oh shit, study hall? My heart raced and I felt my throat constrict. Panic started flowing through me, and I felt my stomach knot up. Study hall. The door loomed ahead, same as always. My feet stopped moving a few steps away, muscle memory trying to protect me. Through the narrow window, I could see Cody already inside, claiming his usual spot. The perfect position to torment me for the next hour. My stomach clenched. The familiar path to the nurse's office beckoned behind me, safe and well-worn. I reached for the handle, then pulled back. Every fiber in my body screamed to go. I turned around and walked away. The nurse's office approached, safety, security, her kind smile and gentle voice. That was a much better option than running into the line of fire, wasn't it? The office now in front of me. The halls now empty with kids tucked into their classrooms. Another handle to pull and open when I heard my mother's voice in my head. "They take another piece." My hand was trembling, but this time, not just from fear. "Nope," I whispered, then louder. "Not today." And I turned and walked back. Today the other handle was getting pulled come hell or high water. _____. The handle turned, and I walked in. All eyes on me except the teacher. There was never a teacher. "You're late, Gallas," Cody sneered. "What's wrong? Nurse get tired of your whining?" Mike's voice joined from the back. "Probably busy making out with your faggot friend Timmy behind the gym again. That's why you two are always missing P, right?" I slid into an empty desk, trying to focus on my textbook. A wadded paper hit the back of my head. Then another. "Hey, princess." Cody leaned forward, his breath hot on my neck. "Show everyone that trick where you eat dirt. Remember yesterday? When you licked it clean off my boot?" Snickers rippled through the room. Someone made a slurping sound. Or maybe... Mike moved closer. "We should check if he's wearing his sister's underwear again. Bet that's why he changes in the nurse's bathroom. Come on, stand up, take off your pants. Let's see your pink panties. Who wants to see?" He asked the class. Laughter erupted. "I want to see," Mike insisted. "Come on, pussy." Cody grabbed my arm and lifted me up. He was a strong fucker. Nah. Cody slammed me back in the chair and grabbed my math homework off my desk. First, let's see what the retard wrote. But he can't even count to 10 without his mommy's help. He started reading in a mocking baby voice. 2 plus 2 equals. Hey everyone, he got this one wrong too. The paper ripped as he crumpled it, dropping the pieces onto my desk. What's wrong? Gonna cry. Run to mommy. I just sat there, rage beginning to burn. My face hot. Everything stopped. The classroom faded to shadow. Only Cody's sneering face remained visible, frozen mid-taunt. And then the voice, my voice, but darker, colder. Look at you. Look at you. Sitting there, taking it like the worthless thing you are. The demon's breath felt like ice on my neck. He's right, you know. You are pathetic. I've watched you run. I've watched you hide. I've given you power, and you waste it. The rage wasn't hot anymore. It was Arctic crystalline, spreading through my veins like black ice. You want me? The demon hissed. Then use me. Or I swear, I'll join them instead. Because at least they know how to bite back. The shadows swirled, and suddenly I was back. Cody's mouth was opening for another insult. I slammed to my feet, the chair clattering behind me. My hand shot out, smacking his away with a crack that silenced the room. The words poured out of me, my voice strange and hard. After school, by the buses. You and me. I'm gonna kick your fucking ass. The demon purred inside me, finally satisfied. Finally free. ____. 40 years later, this scene still haunts me and sends chills down my back. It was the defining moment in life where the demon took me. It haunts me to this day. But what I didn't realize was what I had unleashed. A destructive power that would often escape my control. Yes, it gave me what I needed then, but at a cost. Maybe I had this power, but maybe it also had me. Chapter 5. The fire outside my tent burned softly. I watched the flames dance from my small two-man tent, looking at my feet and feeling the fire's heat warm my toes. I've always had chilly feet. The flames crackled, burning the kindling that I gathered from the forest after my long hike up to the top of the mountain. My book on my chest, The Catcher in the Rye, assigned reading from my 9th grade English class. It was a cool night, not cold, but cool enough. And if not for the fire, the sun setting now below the horizon would bring an uncomfortable chill. The wind shook the trees, and I could hear pine needles slapping against my tent. But there was another sound, quiet at first. It sounded like the crunching of pine needles. Maybe a dog? A bear? I started getting a little worried as the sound got a little louder, a little closer. I sat up. Shit, I was totally naked. Did I have enough time to get dressed? The crunching stopped just outside my tent. Hello? I asked. No food here, go away. I'm sorry, I'm lost. A girl's voice. Where am I? Can you help? I said, need to get dressed. Give me a minute. But before I could, she popped her head into the tent and gave me a smile. Oh, that's okay. It's really late and I'm not in a hurry. Take your time. Maybe in the morning you can show me how to get back to civilization. She said, Is it okay if I come in? She asked, already sliding into my tent. The firelight silhouetted her against the nylon walls. She moved with a confidence I'd only seen in the senior girls at school, the ones who knew exactly the effect they had on freshman boys. I got turned around on the trail, she said, settling close. Too close. The scent of her shampoo mixed with pine. But maybe getting lost wasn't such a bad thing. Her hand found my bare shoulder in the glow of the fire. My breath caught. She was everything I'd imagined during the solitary nights in my tent. The way she moved, how her hair fell across her face, the knowing smile that said she'd chosen me. The sleeping bag suddenly felt too warm, too confining. You're shaking, she whispered, leaning closer. Don't be nervous. The night grew hazier, dreamlike. Her touch, her warmth, the soft sounds of her breathing. The fire crackled outside, casting dancing shadows as my fantasy reached its inevitable, solitary conclusion. Later, staring at the tent's ceiling, my breathing still ragged, I listened to the actual night sounds, wind in the pines, distant owls, the dying fire. Reality returned, but the fantasy had served its purpose. These mountain nights were mine alone, where imagination could run wild and nobody would ever know. ____. Those camping nights served as a nice break from the chaos of home construction. Weekends and summer breaks offered very little reprieve from the repetitive hard labor we all endured. My parents' projects became my own, sucking up water from the flooded basement to hauling trash. The work was long, difficult, and dangerous. My dad suffered a shattered wrist when the ladder slipped out from under him and he crashed to the floor. He'd be in a cast for almost a year, and the pain still bothers him 40 years later. A nail found the soft underside of his foot in a later accident penetrating clear through his foot and to the other side. He couldn't remove the board that the nail was in, nor his shoe, and had to hop his way to the car and into the emergency room. When Dad went to work, I had my best friends, Brian and Steve. And soon after the confrontation with my demons, the three of us discovered Zetso's magic castle. Zetso's was buried in the basement halls of the largest indoor mall west of the Mississippi. Here in Englewood, Colorado, at the intersection of Hampton and Santa Fe, was the magnificent, shiny new Cinderella City, a supermall with tens of thousands of square feet of shops and food, and a sanctuary for teenagers and their parents alike. The upper floors of Cinderella City looked like Roman architecture with marbled floors and towering pillars. The ramps and escalators zigged and zagged throughout, connecting premium retailers, Macy's, Sam Goody, J.C. Penney, and Woolworths. After grabbing an orange Julius, we kids made our way to the basement, affectionately named Cinder Alley. The basement was a long, huge labyrinth of narrow halls with low ceilings that may have inspired J.K. Rowling to write about Diagon Alley. These were the cheap seats in the mall, and as such, attracted the obscure stores with niche clientele, including the 1980s punk rocker. Steve, Brian, and I walked the alley, trying not to look too obviously at the teenagers with spiked black hair, mohawks, and eyeliner. It was like a carnival composed of the coolest things we'd ever seen. Passing Spencer Gifts and the basement arcade, we stumbled onto Zetso's magic castle and made our way in. This visit would change my life forever. "Hey guys, check this out." The magician grinned, his mustache twitching as he placed a glass Coke bottle on the counter. He held up a quarter. "See this? Watch carefully." Steve and I leaned in closer. The magician showed us a quarter, pinched between his middle and index finger, slapped the bottle with his hand. It made a clink, and the quarter vanished. He lifted the bottle. There it was sitting inside. "No way." Steve's eyes went wide. "How'd you do that?" "Trade secret," the magician winked. "But for $15, it could be your secret too." I pulled out my allowance money before he finished speaking. Steve did the same. "Now," the magician's eyes sparkled, holding up empty hands. "I have here an invisible deck of cards." He fanned nothing through the air. "Pick a card, any card. Don't tell me. Just remember it." Steve and I played along, pretending to study the invisible cards. "Got one in mind?" He mimed collecting the deck. "Okay, what was your card?" "Jack of Hearts," I said. He reached under the counter and pulled out a real deck. As he spread the cards face up, there was one card face down in the middle. He pulled it out slowly. "Is this your card?" "The Jack of Hearts." Steve and I looked at each other, jaws dropped. $20, he said, already reaching for two more decks. He knew he had us. "Oh, and before you go," he held up a small piece of paper. With a bright flash and a whoosh, it vanished in a ball of fire, leaving nothing but a whiff of smoke. Flash paper, $3 a pack. We emptied our pockets. Months later, and many allowances in Zetso's cash drawers, Steve and I had built up quite the inventory. Brian grabbed a few gimmicks, and he would have made a great magician, but he never invested too much into it. Steve and I, however, bought books on magic, attended magic lessons together, and practiced and rehearsed together as often as possible. We amazed our family and used this talent to build relationships at school. Before long, I had a suitcase brimming with illusions and gimmicks and a talent that few people will ever learn. I spent hours in front of the TV practicing card and coin sleights of hand. Mom watched reruns of Magnum P.I. as I was pulling coins from the air and just as quickly making them disappear. "Mom, watch this." I held up a quarter while she sat on the couch, eyes darting between me and Tom Selleck's mustache. Just a second, honey. Commercial break. She got up, walked to the TV, and turned the volume down. Okay, show me. I draped a red silk over the quarter in my palm. Now watch carefully. With a flourish, I whipped away the silk. The coin had vanished. Her eyebrows raised. Where did it? She started to ask, then jumped as I reached behind her ear and produced the quarter. That's really good. She sat up straighter, actually interested now. Do it again. I repeated the trick, this time making the coin appear from behind my own ear. Magnum was getting in the helicopter, no sound out of the console. You know, she said thoughtfully, you could do this for kids' parties. Make some money. What? No way. I'd be too nervous. Oh, please, you're a natural. And we could make you a costume. Her eyes lit up. I could sew you a wizard outfit. We'll put an ad in the Canyon Courier. Young magician available for birthday parties or something like that. Mom, that's embarrassing. $10 per show. No, 20. Parents would pay that. She was already reaching for paper to draft the ad. But what if I mess up? I asked. Then you turn it into part of the show. Trust me, kids will love you. And you need to get out of this house. Sometimes, do something besides construction work. She had a point. And $20 was $20. _____. Before I knew it, I had my first gig, a birthday party just up the hill from downtown Evergreen. I arrived, suitcase in hand. It was my dad's old work suitcase, a big Samsonite, light blue, that was pretty worn. The silk lining was torn, and it was sitting in the basement. Dad can't seem to part with his treasures, so this old thing became Draziu's wizard chest. I felt ridiculous walking up the wooden steps to a stranger's home in the middle of the afternoon, wearing a long black wizard's robe that I had Mom design to specifications and a towering pointed wizard cap. The suitcase in my hand was way too big for my skinny 90-pound, 15-year-old body, and heavy too. I set it down with a thud and knocked on the wooden door. I could hear the kids inside playing and laughing, and from behind the door, "Kids, the magician is here. Take a seat." The door opened, its spring stretched, creaking. Come in. Come in. My name is Pam. You must be Draziu. I mumbled. What's that? Draziu. Draziu. I said louder. Hey kids, this is Draziu. He's going to do a magic show. Be good, sit still, and listen. She said, shuttling the kids into a pile on the floor. Reminded me of Lincoln Elementary, getting ready for story time. I opened my box and pulled out my first trick, ball through steel tube. The way the trick is supposed to work is this. You give the steel ball, marble size, to someone in the audience to inspect. Then you give them the steel tube to inspect and have the member of the audience try to push the ball through the tube to discover that it can't go through. Then you take the steel tube, place it between your thumb and forefinger, place the steel ball on top, say the magic words, "All a peanut butter sandwiches," and the ball slowly, magically sinks through the steel tube and magically rises as well. But that's not what happened. I took the tube and ball and placed the tube between my fingers. My hands were shaking like crazy, the ball bouncing on top. Ahem! I cleared my throat. My voice gave a prepubescent squeak, say the magic words, "Alapoo." The ball rattled off the top, dropped to the wood floor, and rolled right onto the heater vent. I chased it, dropping my tube, tripping on my robe, losing my hat, and stumbled, grasping for the ball to have it clunk to the ducting after bypassing through the vent. Oh, sure, my demon. My face went flush. How could I be so goddamn stupid? Pam ran into the room to quiet the laughing kids. Ha, HAA. He dropped the ball? They pointed, judging me. I was a failure. I can't do this job. What the hell was I thinking? Now, years of torment flushing through me, I was still that awkward chicken shit kid in study hall. Anger building inside me. At myself over a stupid metal marble I couldn't control. The room swirled until I found your ball, Draziu. Pam said, you could do this. These kids would be impressed if you farted on command. I smiled. She reminded me of Mom a little, probably not prepared for her own son's teenage years. What's going to happen when her 5-year-old turns 15? I took a deep breath and steadied the ball on the tube, said nothing, stared into the eyes of each child, and slowly the ball did what it was supposed to do. An hour later, The show ended with roars of applause and Draziu. How did you do that? Draziu. Are you really magic? Draziu, can you do it again? A magician never reveals his secrets, I said with a wink and a smile. The birthday boy grabbed my hand and pulled me. Draziu, eat some cake with me, he said. Oh, can Draziu have some cake? I sat down, the kids surrounding me, laughing, now with excitement and a gleam in their eyes, and I was hooked. My weekends were booked solid with 2 to 3 magic shows each day. I had to cut off the number of shows I could do to make sure I had time to do homework. And I missed hanging out with my friends. It was becoming, you want to go to the mall? No, I got a show. You want to go fishing? No, I got a show. You want to do Gunslinger and Doritos and Bean Dip? No, I got a show. I loved Gunslinger and Doritos and Bean Dip. Steve and I would play for hours. Gunslinger was a role-play game, much like D&D that we got into. We'd run to the gas station down the road, pick up a bag of chips and dip, and let our imaginations go wild. The wagon creaks to a stop, Steve narrated from behind his cardboard screen, crunching a Dorito. 3 bandits emerge from behind the rocks. Their guns are drawn. What do they look like? I asked, fingers orange with cheese dust. The leader's got an eye patch and a scar. Real mean looking. He says, Steve put on a gruff voice. Your money or your life, stranger. I sat up straighter. I draw my Colt Peacemaker. Roll initiative. The 20-sided die clattered across the box on Steve's bed. Natural 20? Nice. You draw lightning fast. What do you do? I fan the hammer, trying to hit all 3 of them before they can shoot. Okay, roll 3 times for accuracy. The die rolled again. 18, 15, 19. The first shot catches the leader right between the eyes. Steve grinned. Second bandit takes it in the chest. Third one's hit in the shoulder, but he's still standing. He's raising his gun. The bedroom door swung open. Steve, Mom wants to know if Paul's staying for dinner? Catherine. My heart did that familiar flip. She was wearing jeans, a plaid shirt. Her short dark hair to her shoulders and longer strands swept across her face and freckles. It sounded like the LSSD bunt cake Riss's HSS puzzle from Steve, but my focus was on her. I licked my orange-stained fingers. You, she said, disgusted. Anyway, we're having pizza, clean up, and come upstairs. Paulba, Steve called. Aiden? After she left, Steve rolled his eyes. The last bandit shoots while you're distracted by my sister. So, it wasn't all that disappointing when one day, I saw Steve's ad in the Canyon Courier. His ad was bigger, bolder, and the people at the Canyon Courier must have gotten a good laugh. The classifieds had ads for ranch equipment, sometimes a rental, maybe a set of skis for sale, but never did they have a magician advertising for magic shows. And now they had 2. Side by side, our ads gleaned the pages of the paper. Classifieds. Draziu Magic professional magic shows for birthday parties and special events. Fire Axe Dove's Illusions. Reasonable rates. Paul Gallus 674-9738. The Amazing Steve Spectacular Magic Shows. Mystify your guests with mind reading, illusions, and more. Perfect for parties and events of all sizes. 674-5512. John Deere Tractor Attachment $150 wanted. Used ski boots size 8 rental. 2BR cabin near Bear Creek, $450 per MO. So, the small mountain town of Evergreen had 2 magicians now. At first, watching my phone grow quieter felt like losing something precious. But necessity bred ambition. I expanded my reach, placing ads in Clear Creek County, Bailey, Golden, Colorado, and Conifer. When I raised my price to $30, instead of silence, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. I had to turn shows away. Each declined party a small betrayal of what I'd started out to be, but I absolutely would not let Steve beat me. The shows grew larger and more expensive, the audiences swelling from dozens to hundreds. High school stages, government courthouses, the Golden Tribune's cafeteria, venues that would have terrified that skinny kid in the homemade wizard costume. But something else was changing too. My sister, no longer just a little kid pretending to help, she became a beautiful part of the act. She'd crouched behind the massive chest, carefully preparing each illusion, handling the doves with a gentleness I never managed. When she emerged, twirling across the stage, her long blonde hair catching the spotlight, her bright blue eyes sparkling, whistles and hoots from the teenage boys, I found myself missing the wide-eyed wonder of those first birthday parties. Steve was still doing those, making kids gasp and believe in magic. ____. The winding mountain road seemed to go on forever, each turn revealing more parked cars hugging the shoulder. The house finally came into view, a massive A-frame with windows glowing amber against the night sky. Music thumped through the walls, audible even from the driveway, where tipsy guests stumbled between their cars. Inside, the living room was a maze of bodies and red plastic cups. I set up my close-up magic at the first table, where a group seemed relatively friendly and interested in my performance. Cards disappeared and reappeared, coins vanished, and gasps of genuine wonder followed me as I moved between groups. This was going well, I thought, just like any other show. One of my favorite tricks, Gorby the Ghost, a simple blue and green scarf laid flat on the floor that would mysteriously rise with the chants of "Rise, Gorby, rise." I'd performed it hundreds of times at birthday parties, the kids always delighted by the ghostly movement. I catch the ghost in a sweeping motion just to reveal that the ghost had gotten away. "Rise, Gorby, rise," the first few voices called out. The scarf began to lift. That's when the comments started. "Oh look, Gorby's excited to see us," a woman shrieked, spilling her wine. "Gorby's got a little something going on there," another voice called out. "Give him a minute, he'll go back down," someone else howled. The room erupted in drunken laughter. My face burned as I tried to maintain my professional demeanor. But the comments kept coming, each one more suggestive than the last. "Put Gorby on your lap, and I'll grab it." These weren't the innocent giggles of children watching a ghost levitate. This was something else entirely, something I was not prepared for, adult humor. My dad was always a stick in the mud. He didn't talk about sex, joke about it, or prepare me for adulthood humor. If the movie was rated R, I wouldn't be allowed to watch it. Hell, the first time I heard the word masturbate on the bus to school, I thought it was a credit card. That earned a lot of laughs too. Reminded me of this night. I quickly packed up the scarf, but the damage was done. Now every trick became an opportunity for innuendo. Women old enough to be my mother began touching my arms and grabbing my behind as I performed card tricks, their fingers lingering too long. Men made increasingly crude suggestions about what other tricks I might know. The magic was dissolving into something uncomfortable, something adult, and I had no idea how to make it stop. Exhausted after 4 hours of performing and the smell of alcohol and pot, I decided to pack it up and go home. It was 1 a.m., I was tired and I had school in the morning. I went to the owner and let him know I was leaving. "Why?" he said. "It's only 1 in the morning. The night is young." He raised his cup and the group cheered. I insisted, letting him know that I had school in the morning and had to leave. So, he refused to pay. I hurried out and drove home. The next day, Mom drove back to the house with me, furious, mumbling to herself, "How dare that? Fucking asho. My little boy? I don't think so." The Buick skidded to a stop at the bottom of the driveway. She got out of the car, engine running, slammed the door closed, and fast walked her way up the driveway into the front door. Bang! Bang! Bang, bang. She didn't knock, she slammed the door. The owner opened it, hung over, eyes puffy and red and hair in a tangled mess. Yeah, he moaned. "How dare you? He's only 16. People like you should. I swear to God I'll..." Not long after, she fast walked down the driveway, got in the car, turned the key. The Buick screamed. It was still running, slapped the cash in my hand, and raced off. The last thing the owner saw was a rooster tail of dirt and dust spraying from the back tire. I did a few more shows after that, but when my trunk of magic disappeared from Dad's pickup one night, it felt less like a theft and more like a release. That skinny kid in the wizard hat had vanished too, replaced by punk rock hair, eyeliner, and a long black trench coat. ____. You must remember that between these shows, the lights, the magic, my beautiful assistant, we were still building a big-ass house. It was growing up nicely. The floors were built, the walls raised, the windows installed. The home was 3 stories tall with large vaulted ceilings and massive windows overlooking the Continental Divide. We were close to finishing the siding on the exterior, beautiful rough pine that left splinters. The scaffolding rose high above. I could see the top of the camper that I used to have some privacy from my sister. The view out over the trees and the sunsetting was beautiful. We only had a few more strips of siding to nail down, and I stepped out onto the scaffold. The scaffold gave way, quickly dropping 3 stories to the hard dirt below. I felt myself falling. Was it another dream? This time, no. The 2x12 board lifted and fell 30 feet down, clattering to the ground. I followed. Somehow, however, I clamped my hands and arms around the 4x4 scaffolding posts, squeezed as hard as I could, sliding down, collecting shards of wood in my hands and arms, squeezing and smelling my skin burn as I slid down. I stopped, now 2 stories above the ground. I felt the panic in my parents' terrified yells. Not another son. Dad ran downstairs as fast as he could. I could hear his feet thumping on the unfinished plywood. Fuck, fuck, fuck. Hold on. He grabbed an aluminum ladder and ran from the back of the house all the way around to the front like a fireman running drills. Damn, he's fast. I thought. I couldn't feel my hands. The ladder came under me and I climbed down. My hands and arms red, on fire. A huge blister forming. Mom picked out the splinters before I could feel anything, sterilized my hands, and wrapped them in thick gauze. I was sore, but hey, I didn't need to work for a couple of days, so things were looking up. Healing, I showed Steve and Brian my blisters. Holy shit, dude, Steve examined my bandaged hands. You know, most people just use the stairs. His signature wheezy laugh followed. Yeah, but Paul here had to try the express route, Brian added, making a whistling sound followed by a crash effect with his mouth. Pew-ow. Splat. At least I didn't have to work. I grinned, wincing as I tried to move my fingers. Oh right, because third-degree friction burns are totally better than manual labor. Steve rolled his eyes. Brilliant plan there, Einstein. Brian jumped up, pretending to be me on the scaffold. Look, Ma, no hands. Then he made exaggerated falling motions, complete with cartoon sound effects. You guys suck, I laughed. Says the guy who tried to hug a 4x4 at terminal velocity. Steve smirked. Hey, since you're not drinking basement water, how about that trip up Monkey Mountain? Really? Brian stopped to think. Why not? Summer, no work, can't MasterCard your dingling. I rolled my eyes. Come on, Steve grinned. What's the worst that could happen? I mean, besides falling to your death again. Monkey Mountain was not the official name of this peak, but it had a rock formation at the top that appeared as a monkey's profile from a specific angle. This was a towing monstrosity in Evergreen, the tallest mountain in town, rising to 10,000 feet above sea level, and a vertical climb from my bus stop to the top, 2,500 feet. This was no walk in the park. This would be a serious climb, something we had talked about doing a lot. The mountain covered in trees like a blanket of pine, and we really had no idea what we were in for until standing at the bottom of it. Looking up with backpacks and boots, our eyes raised to the sky, necks cranked back, our hands shading our eyes, my bandage flapping in the wind. We took a deep breath and took our first step off the road and onto the mountain itself. This didn't feel too much different from my solo hikes up to my camping spot. The thick forest surrounded us. Trees so tall we were given shade on what was otherwise a hot summer day. The air was calm, but the wind howled through the tops of the trees. We were met with quaint streams with winter water runoff, an occasional backyard of an isolated home. We'd sneak around in hopes of not disturbing some soloist with a shotgun. Birds flew above us, perched on the branches of the pines and aspens, and fluttered off again. After an hour of hiking, the mountain got steeper and steeper. Shaped like an exponential curve, each step we took became more difficult, more labored. The heat was compounded by our heavy breaths and heavy footfalls. Where the hell is the top of this thing? I asked, taking a drink from my canteen. Are we almost there yet? Brian whined like a child in the back seat of a car. Abiadampa Palba, Steve said. Before long, the trees seemed to be laying flat on the hillside. It was so steep, we could reach out and almost touch the ground. Feet kept slipping on the soft pine needle tarp. Our chests heaved with deep breaths as our bodies adjusted to the increasing altitude. You know what would be funny? Steve wheezed between breaths. If we get to the top, and it doesn't even look like a monkey, more like Suicide Mountain, I mumbled, grabbing a tree trunk to keep from sliding backwards. Brian made exaggerated gasping sounds. Tell my mom. Dramatic pause for breath. I died doing. Another gasp, something really stupid. And for my next trick, look, a vibrator. Steve snickered. You're trying too hard, Steve, I said, panting. You can make on Golden Blonde appear out of your underwear. VHS mouth coils. Steve laughed nervously. Hey guys, Brian's voice had lost its usual playfulness. What if we, can't get back down? Shut up, Brian, Steve and I said in unison. I looked down through the trees, something I immediately regretted. The ground dropped away at a sickening angle. Maybe we should. Don't say it, Steve cut me off, forcing another laugh. We're not turning around after coming this far. Besides, the monkey's waiting. Unless the monkey kills us, Brian added, making the screeching sounds from Psycho that came out more nervous than funny. Your mom's gonna kill us first if we don't make it home for breakfast, I said, trying to sound casual while my heart hammered. Steve grabbed another tree. Well, on the bright side, if we fall, we'll get down quick. Like Paul's scaffold descent, Brian added, his joke slightly hysterical. Let's just... I paused to catch my breath. Keep going. We're probably almost there. You said that an hour ago, Steve pointed out. Yeah, but this time I might not be lying. The day was beginning to get late, and while we couldn't see exactly where the sun was, the shadows from the trees became heavier. But we figured that as long as we were going up, we'd eventually get to the top. It was the wind that had us worried. Would we need to camp in the forest on this steep hill? What would happen if we tossed and turned and tumbled down? These conversations also came up. But then, almost as suddenly as our first step onto the mountain, a wall of rocks cropped up in front of us. Is this it? I asked. We looked up, and the wall of rocks towered over us. 100 feet? We didn't know, but they went up. Straight up, and it would take more than we were prepared for to climb them. Could we go around? How long would that take? In hindsight, 15-year-old logic hadn't really kicked in yet, so we climbed. The rock face loomed before us, a sheer wall of granite with just enough ledges and cracks to make us think we could do this. We probably shouldn't have, but 16-year-old boys don't think and shouldn't. I reached for the first handhold, testing it. Below us, the steep forest floor we'd just climbed now looked deceptively gentle. The first 10 feet weren't so bad. We could still jump down if we had to. But at 20 feet up, the whole perspective changed. Holy shit, Steve's voice cracked as he made the mistake of looking back. The trees below had become a vast green carpet, and between their tops, our valley leading into evergreen, my house on the top of the hill, the road my bus traveled down like a model train set with miniature sets sprawled behind us and below. Don't look down, Brian chanted to himself, but of course he did. His foot slipped, sending a cascade of pebbles bouncing down the cliff face. We listened to them bounce and skitter until we couldn't hear them anymore. Oh shit, he whimpered. Each movement became a careful negotiation. Find a grip, test it, pray it holds. The rock was warm from the afternoon sun. Our palms were sweating. Halfway up, my arms started shaking. There was no path down anymore. The only way was up. My bandage unraveling and getting in my way, I tore it loose and let it catch in the wind and float away. Hey guys, I called out, pressed against the rock. I can see the top. Almost up, Steve said. A chunk of rock crumbled under Steve's hand. He let out a yelp. We were beyond jokes now, each of us in our own private world of determination. The top was close. Thank goodness, too, because our bodies couldn't take much more of this. The rock face had seemed so small from the bottom. From here, it was larger than life. We stood, perched at the edge of the rocks we just climbed, looking down and over the city of Evergreen, mostly green mountains and hills covered in pine. When they named this place, they weren't kidding around. I whispered. Maybe Steve and Brian didn't hear me. The wind was howling. At the top of this mountain, the Continental Divide seemed closer than ever, the sun lighting its bare slopes that rose another 4,000 feet above where we stood. To the other side, the city of Denver sprawled out, Lights began to flicker as the shadows from the Rockies darkened the ground. It was magnificent. We looked over the side of the cliff. It was a long way down. We didn't need to say a thing. It was at exactly that time when the tranquility of the world fully engulfed us that Brian picked up a large rock and hurled it off the edge of the cliff and cried, "Not my baby!" The rock fell for a few seconds, and we heard it crack far below us. Steve and I looked at each other, then looked at Brian, his red hair dancing in the wind. Brian's expression changed from a smile to doubt. Had he gone too far? We looked at each other. Then Steve and I grabbed 2 more rocks. "Not my baby!" We both yelled in high-pitched voices and listened for the flight of the rock's termination. Well, this went on for some time, all of us laughing hilariously, more happy to be alive than at the thought of launching babies from 10,000 feet. But the sun was getting low, and it was time to eat. We had each carried dinner up in our packs. I had the bread, now squished and warm. Steve had the can of beans and franks, and Brian had a bag of beef jerky. We pitched our tent and made a fire looking forward to beans and franks and a slice of bread. We didn't eat much, but after that climb, we were starving. Rubbing my hands together by the fire. "Let's eat," I exclaimed. Steve whipped out the can of beans and franks, and we all sat there looking at it. Then at each other. Steve began. "Can opener?" I looked at Brian. Brian looked at Steve, then at me. We all shrugged, and then, "Phew," we moaned in harmony. The bread was consumed, the beef jerky gone, now a can of beans and franks sitting by the fire. A new quest had begun. Steve picked it up and threw it at a tree. Nothing. I took it and slammed it to the ground. The pine needles dampened any damage possible. Brian came up with a brilliant idea to set the can on the fire, explode it, and eat the carnage. We poked it with sticks and smashed it with rocks. The can was dent to all high heaven, but the can did not open. The sun had set, our fire glowing and stomachs rumbling. I sat there, Indian style, tapping the can with a stick, face in my other hand, cradling my chin. "We could lick it," Steve suggested, staring at the battered can. "Eat the paper on the can. I'm so hungry." I poked it again with my stick. "Not my baby," I mumbled without enthusiasm. "Hey, at least we'll get our daily serving of aluminum," Brian sighed, his stomach growling loud enough to echo off the rocks. "You know it will be great right now." Steve laid back, staring at the stars. "Bojo's." "Shut up," Brian and I groaned together. "Maybe a bear will come along with a can opener," Brian mused. "A really nice bear." The can rolled slightly in the firelight, mocking us with its dents and scratches. All seemed hopeless, but my 15-year-old brain wasn't done solving this problem. "I had an idea. I have an idea," I said. Brian was licking tree sap off his finger. I took off my shoe and sock. My foot was red, wrinkled and sweaty from the day's captivity. I found a rock with the sharpest point and wrapped it with my sock, giving me a good grip on the rock. "Give it here, cripple," Steve said, understanding my idea, but refusing to let me injure myself further. He started slamming the can's top. Whack, 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 whack. "Practice much?" Brian snickered. But when the first hole in the can opened, the smell of sweet beans wafted through the camp. "Thank God for your masturbatory excellence, Eben," Brian exclaimed. The hole opened a little more, and a bean squeezed out. We split the can 3 ways, demolished its contents, and with sweet bean sauce sticking up our fingers and cheeks, we smiled, laid back, and fell asleep. _____. 10,000 feet above sea level. I don't care where you are, it was cold as fuck. The 3 of us huddled together through the night, trying to share each other's warmth. We took turns keeping the fire going, but finding wood in the dark was tricky. Sleep was very intermittent, and so when the sun's rays first came over Denver's horizon, we were ready to go home. The trip down went very fast. We skirted around the monkey's head, slid and skied our way through the forest using the trees to slow us down. Brian slipped and skidded on his rear and feet, but popped right back up. We only stopped at a rushing stream to fill our bottles up with fresh cold water. It was the best water on the planet. By 7 a.m., according to our sundials, we intercepted a paved road. Not the same place where we started our climb, but I knew where we were. Another 3 miles, and we'd be home. This time, my bus stop had a different feeling. It was the end of our journey and a landmark that welcomed me home. We stopped to pet the horse. Hunger upon us. Cut through the field and followed the path Mom and I made. Rounding over the top of the hill, our house stood there, mightily 3 stories proud, facing the west like wagoneers on a caravan. Opened the front door, walked in, and stopped in our tracks. Waffles! ________ failure is always an option. I listen to the bullshit from my modern motivational feeds that it's not an option. This rhetoric to try and push people towards failure, but deny its existence is in itself its own failure. Thinking about it, the demon is failure personified. The demon resists its evolution, fighting you, embarrassing and humiliating you into submission, and if you do nothing to challenge it, to confront it, to feed it, you will never meet it and will always be a barrier to true potential. Failure is always an option, and in life we need to seek it constantly, whether by challenging ourselves with the impossible and discovering the plausible to eventually meet our potential and finally live a life worth living. Chapter 6. The living room was dim past midnight, just the soft glow from the wood stove casting shadows on the walls. Mom curled up in her favorite corner of the couch, her voice gentle as she shared her heart. I feel like I'm disappearing sometimes, she said, drawing her knees up to her chest. When your father's home, it's like I have to make myself smaller. Does that make sense? I sat beside her on the couch, turned to face her. Because you can't be yourself? She nodded, a sad smile touching her lips. I'm different when he's gone. More alive. When he's flying, I can breathe. I can dream. She paused, her fingers tracing patterns on the couch fabric. But then he comes home, and all those dreams have to go back in their box. What kind of dreams? I asked softly. Oh, honey. She looked at me with such raw honesty, it almost hurt. Adventure. Freedom. The kind of life where you don't have to ask permission to be happy. Her voice caught. You know what he does? He sits in our room with those headphones on, listening to love songs until he cries. Just sits there weeping, saying no one loves him. Even after we've been intimate. It's even worse. It's like he empties himself completely, and it doesn't matter how many times I tell him I love him. He doesn't believe me. He just insists that I don't. I absorb this, choosing my words carefully. That sounds really lonely. For both of you. You understand so well, she whispered, reaching out to squeeze my hand. That's why he gets jealous, you know? Of you. Of this connection we have. He sees how I light up when we talk, how much I trust you. She trailed off, lost in thought for a moment. Joyce says I deserve more than living in someone else's shadow. Joyce was Mom's best friend and Dad's nemesis. The clock ticked quietly in the background as we sat there, mother and son, the lines between parent and confidant blurring in the midnight hours. I felt the weight of her trust, the responsibility of holding her pain. Sometimes I think that maybe Dad is right, that I don't love him anymore. Even though he's the most passionate lover, he changes, you know. In front of you and Chrissy, he hides himself. When we're making love, he's transformed. She paused. My expression might have tipped her off, like walking in on your parents having sex. I steadied myself. You deserve to be happy, Mom, I said finally. Everyone does. She looked at me then, really looked at me, with eyes full of love and something like wonder. When did you get so wise? Her smile was genuine this time, touched with both pride and sadness. Sometimes I forget you're only 15. You seem so much older when we talk like this. I didn't tell her that maybe I seemed older because of moments like these, because of all the adult weight I carried in my teenage heart. Instead, I just listened as she continued to share her soul in the quiet hours before dawn. The good news was I didn't have to go to school that day. I slept in, read comic books, and spent the day in my room reading, listening to Duran Duran, Girls on Film, Toto, Africa, and my black swan of records, Barry Gibb and Barbra Streisand duo. Steve always gave me shit for listening to that one. 9th grade, 1981. At Clear Creek wasn't too bad. With my demon roaming free around the school campus, despite my small frame, I was getting a little respect. I was even on the school ski team. We left school early to take the bus to Loveland to practice. Disciplines like skiing down the hill with one ski, or no poles, or loose boots, It was fun, but the end of the day was exhausting, and that additional 1.5 hour bus ride at night didn't make things any easier. I walked home late, in the pitch dark, with only the sound of wind whooshing through the treetops, mildly illuminated by the few scattered lights from warm fires through the windows of their homes. I arrived home, my sister curled up with Dad watching Hogan's Heroes, and Mom in the kitchen creating amazing smells that filled the home. "Welcome home, honey," Mom exclaimed. Dad looked at me, raised up his hand. "Hi." My sister curled up, pressed her finger to her nose to flatten it like a pig, stuck out her tongue, and went back to snuggling. "Kitty," my dad yelled. "Tell Paul what we decided on today." Mom came in from the kitchen, drying her hands on her apron. "We enrolled you at Regis for next year." Dad paused the VCR with a new wired remote. "The Jesuit school," he added, sitting up straighter. "In Denver." "Another school?" I felt my stomach tighten after finally finding my footing at Clear Creek. "It's a better school," Mom cut in, practical as always. "Better education, and those kids have some actual manners. No more of those assholes you've had to deal with. The spiritual guidance will be good for you," Dad nodded sagely. "But how would I even get there?" "Already worked that out," Mom said briskly. "There's another boy from Evergreen who goes there. Ken something. His mother's doing a carpool. You'll manage just fine." Her tone left no room for debate. "It's done," Dad added with finality. "You start in September after summer." I stood there in my ski clothes, still damp from practice, wondering how many times I'd have to start over. 5 schools in 4 years. Each time thinking I'd finally figured out where I fit. Mom must have read something in my expression. "Oh, for heaven's sake, you'll be fine. Now go get changed. Dinner's almost ready." ______. I stood outside the Pink Palace, a 100-year-old historic structure that was the Regis Jesuit High School. It was located at the far end of the university campus and stuck out like a sore thumb amidst the more modern university buildings. Its small windows and 1800s architecture, including large masonry bricks, solid wooden doors, asserted a historical value that both scared me and impressed me. The other boys were waiting in line. I thought. No cowboys. This group was very homogeneous, with feathered hairstyles, all parted on the left, corduroy pants with a belt, and polo shirts tucked in. The dress code was simple, no jeans, and all shirts must have a collar, something I'd exploit later on. I had my Sony Walkman, its heavy steel case, cool in my palm, listening to Al Stewart, Time Passages, while observing all the new strangers in my life. The big heavy wooden doors unlocked with a loud click, and the doors opened, and we all filed in. Almost instantly, I smelled the 100-year-old history of this building. It was musky, woody, and I could see the ghosts of students past roaming the long hallway, perfectly straight, with a long row of old lockers that squeaked when opened. At the far end of the hallway, another door letting in the juniors and seniors. I found my locker, put my Walkman and backpack in, and timidly found my first classroom. I hefted its heavy door open. 10th grade boys, sitting calmly in their seats. A long, large chalkboard at the front of the room. My teacher looking through her lesson plans. She noticed me and looked up. "Mr. Gallas, take that seat over there," she said. How the hell does she know my name? I wondered. I took a seat at an old desk with a heavy wooden top and durable steel base. The table had engravings from other students, their names with etched graduation dates. Ben Buckley, 1969. George Hawthorne, 1954. Buckwheat, 1980. The teacher began. The classroom fell silent as Mrs. Clarkson stood, her posture straight but not rigid, commanding attention without demanding it. She wore a simple tweed vest with a matching dress and carried herself with quiet confidence. "Welcome to sophomore year," she said, scanning the room with alert eyes that seemed to take in everything. "I'm Mrs. Clarkson, and I'll be teaching both your geometry and Spanish classes this year." She paused, a slight smile forming. "Which means some of you will be seeing quite a lot of me." She picked up a sheet from her desk. "We have several new faces joining us. Mr. Gallas." She looked directly at me, her expression warm but professional. "Mr. Reeves, Mr. Thompson." She nodded to 2 other boys who looked as out of place as I felt. "The rest of you know how we do things here at Regis, so I trust you'll help our new classmates find their footing." Moving to the chalkboard, she wrote expectations in precise letters. At Regis, we believe in three things: respect, excellence, growth, and God. This isn't about memorizing formulas or conjugating verbs, though we'll certainly do both. A few knowing chuckles from the returning students. It's about learning to think, to question, to understand. She turned back to face us. You'll find I'm fair, but I expect your best. Every day. If you're struggling, my door is open. If you're excelling, I'll push you further. And if you're daydreaming about the Mary Crest girls while I'm explaining tangents. She glanced at the class over her glasses with a raised eyebrow that somehow managed to be both stern and amused. Well, we'll work on that too. The tension in my shoulders began to ease slightly. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. _____. Ken and I spent a lot of time commuting together. One of our parents drove us to school each day, but each day the two of us had to find our way home. This consisted of multiple bus rides to get to downtown Denver and the long commuter bus into Evergreen. While we were expected to be doing our homework, well, that never happened. Ken was a tall and very good-looking boy. He stood shoulders above me, but for some reason he really liked me. His smile was genuine and he was charming. My heart skipped a beat when he called my name. Paul! I whipped off my headphones. Yes, Ken? I gazed up at him. Perfect hair, perfect teeth, and a smile that could melt the coldest of hearts. I think my lashes were fluttering. After school, meet me at the Shop and Go by the bus stop. Sure thing. I really needed to stop this. We met up at the Shop and Go, composed now. I saw Ken and gave him a quick, "What's up?" head nod, cool collected. He took my arm and pulled me over by the cigarette aisle and whispered in my ear, "Hold still." Before I could react, he spun me around, unzipped my backpack, and shoved a carton of Marlboros inside. My heart raced as I felt the weight of the contraband drop into my bag. What the hell? I hissed, but Ken just zipped up my bag and steered me toward the door, that perfect smile never wavering. Just walk normal, he murmured, his hand firm on my shoulder. You're fine. I've done this 100 times. The distance to the door felt like miles. My legs moved mechanically while my mind raced. This wasn't some minor shoplifting. This was a whole carton. But Ken's confidence was infectious, his grip on my shoulder both reassuring and controlling. The same charm that had me swooning earlier now felt like a trap. He stopped in front of the cashier. She was watching us. My fear rose, and my face felt like it was going to pop. "Huh," Ken said to her and smiled. We stood waiting, her expressionless face scanning us. Her face changed, a smile wrapped around her head. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at Ken. "Hi," she said back. "Our bus is almost here," Ken said, "but I'll be back. Do you work tomorrow?" She nodded. The bell above the door chimed as we walked out. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it, but Ken just kept walking, casual as could be, guiding me toward the bus stop. Once we were clear, he finally let go of my shoulder. "See? Easy. Now we're set for the whole week." I honestly can't tell you how many cigarettes we had stolen, enough to get me addicted, but not enough to get me arrested. Our adventures carried on throughout the year, with heists and exploring downtown Denver along 19th Street Mall. This would all come to an end, though, after I got my driver's license. Ken with his groupies and me with my friends took separate paths. I really don't know what happened to him other than years later, I ran into him working in the Bergen Park Shop and Go, balding, fat, and I'll be damned if his eyes weren't fluttering at me. ____. My sister had a big crush on Ken. At 12 years old and in 6th grade, she was still struggling to figure out what was going on in those brown eyes of his. She'd beg Mom, "Please pick up Ken first before taking me to school." "Chris, he's older than me," I yelled. "Go play with your girl toys." "HMFF," she snorted. But I couldn't deny it anymore. My sister was getting older. Occasionally, she'd have her friends over, and they'd go out and jump on the trampoline. From the house, I'd see them laughing and jumping and go out and casually stroll over. "What are you doing here?" she'd ask. Her girlfriends giggling. The fort I'd built in the trees surrounding the trampoline was a convenient reason to irritate my sister and watch her friends from my perch. My sister was no idiot, and while she watched me up in my loft, she'd bounce and give me the evil eye, Her friends in their short athletic shorts. You remember those from the 80s? They left little room for imagination, but at 16, I had a big imagination. My sister knew exactly what was going on. Chris hid her intelligence behind her blue eyes and gold hair and used those to get what she needed. But inside, she was a whirlwind of thoughts, compassion, and empathy. Her empathy was so powerful, it was almost magical. She could tell from 100 meters exactly what anyone was thinking or feeling. And as long as she used this power for good, all was well. However, if it turned, her blue eyes darkened and her demon would emerge. Unfiltered, unrestrained, and she would test the boundaries of all that was holy, and the Pope would need to raise his crucifix and call on God. May the power of Christ compel you to put her monster away. Maybe I'm getting carried away here, but she could be wicked, and I was always very weary of that dark side of her. Her dark side, like the Colorado summers, were unpredictable with its beautiful warm weather, clear blue skies that would almost, without warning, push out massive cumulonimbus clouds from behind the Continental Divide, filled with ice and fire and roars so loud it could deafen you. My mom, in an attempt to preserve the youthful dynamics between my sister and me, forced us out of the house. "Stop playing that stupid Atari. I'm getting sick of listening to it all day," Mom complained. "One more level, Mom," I yelled. "It's my turn," Chris complained. "Mom, Paul hasn't let me play on it all day." She faked her weepy, crying voice mostly, because it was a cinch to lock up Dad with it. Mom was a little less impressed, but it was true. I'd been battling Star Wars walkers all morning. "I don't care. Paul, turn off that damn game now, or I'm unplugging it and throwing it away. You too, go take a bike ride. It's a beautiful day out. I'll pack you a lunch, and you can have a picnic together." "Oh, Mom!" It was our day off. Chris and I could spend it power struggling over the Atari together, or go for a bike ride and argue outside. Mom was the deciding vote, so Chris and I headed out. Chris inherited my old Schwinn Stingray, and I rode a heavier Schwinn Varsity 10-speed. I preferred my old yellow bike with the banana seat and missed the adventures I took it on in Palatine. The 10-speed's tires were too narrow, and I couldn't ride it up the hill, so it mostly sat in the garage collecting dust. I rode my bike, sandwich bag in one hand, swinging with each pedal stroke, and we rode down our homemade a-quarter-mile driveway until connecting with Whiskey J Hill Road, a steep dirt road, pitted and always washboard. Chris and I rode down the hill. "How are you doing?" I asked, vibrating along the narrow road. "G-O-O-D," my sister resonated back. We got down to Upper Bear Creek Road, my old bus stop, and turned west towards the mountains. The road was quiet, with only the sound of our wheels whirring on the pavement. My sister with her legs spinning like crazy to keep up with me. "Slow down," she complained. Hey. I laughed and sped up. "Paul." Her voice got quiet as I created distance between us. I turned my head to look behind, her little legs pouring her heart and soul to keep up, her body rocking wildly with effort. Behind me, the large terror, was now a fragile little girl who wanted to, but just couldn't keep up with her brother, no matter how hard she tried. I may have been the kind and charitable big brother that she enjoyed abusing, but I was always the big brother, and she was always struggling to keep up. "Damn," I said to myself, and slowed down. Despite my strong urge to get even with her for all the chaos she created, all the time she deliberately lied to get her way with Mom and Dad, and all the creative plots she invented to get me in trouble with them. On days she taped popsicle sticks to her fingers and accused me of breaking them. On this day, here and now, watching her struggle, my protective instincts kicked in. My love/hate relationship fought with each other. Love won, and I put my hand on her back and pushed her up the hill. Our bike slowed down, and the pavement turned to gravel. This was far enough, and I was getting hungry. We sat and ate lunch quietly, just watching the birds fly and squirrels chase each other up trees when we heard a distant rumble. We were buried in the trees where the pavement ended and dirt began, and didn't get a good view of the sky. "How far away do you think that is?" my sister asked. The ambient light became muted, and the wind picked up whistling through the treetops. "Not long, I think," I said. "Ready to head back?" She nodded, and we rolled back down the hill, about 3 miles from home. The gentle wind quickly turned into a strong tailwind, pushing us down the hill. By the time we arrived at the bus stop, the clouds were overhead and threatening. The once clear view of MT Evans was now completely obscured by heavy verga. The clouds, as usual, were massive. The wind was strong, whipping our hair and clothing. The grass bent in half as we started pushing our bikes up the hill. We felt the first drops of rain, the wind whipping now. Crackles of strong thunder not far away. "I'm scared," my sister said. She grabbed my hand as the rain came down stronger and stronger. The horse had gone in his stable as the storm intensified. The pine trees now swaying. "Give me your bike," I yelled, trying to be heard over the rain. I took both bikes and yelled, "Run!" Chris and I were directly beneath the massive storm cell, exposed on the hillside where lightning loved to strike. Everyone knew the stories. The hikers caught on mountaintops, the golfers who thought they could finish one more hole, the kids who didn't make it home. And here we were, in the heart of one of the largest storms of the year. Crashes of thunder split the sky. The noise was deafening. The rain turned to hail, and its ice pellets stinging my back and legs. "Get in front of me," I yelled at my sister. Her face and head drenched, I couldn't tell if she was crying. She huddled to my front, letting me take the hail, stinging snaps like spider bites on my legs and neck. Crack! A sound so loud it opened hell itself. My sister jumped, her head hitting my chin, the thunder literally swallowing her scream. A tree exploded only 50 feet from where we stood. "It hit me! It hit me!" she screamed, her whole body shaking. She grabbed my arm, so hard her nails dug in. Terror had turned her into pure electricity. Eyes wild, every nerve in her body firing at once. I knew the bolt hadn't touched her, but try telling that to a terrified 12-year-old in the middle of Armageddon itself. She was feeling phantom lightning, her fear creating its own voltage. My arms ached from dragging the bikes. Chris pressed against me as we stumbled up the hill, the hail still stinging, the wind still howling. Every flash of lightning made us flinch, waiting for that next explosive crack. We were soaked through, exhausted, but we kept moving one foot in front of the other. The edges of the road, a torrent of water carving ditches deeper and sweeping away the debris from the forest being hammered from above. Getting closer to the top of the hill, only a half-mile more to go, it was then that we saw the lights of Mom's car. She pulled over, ran out, and opened the door. "Getting you idiots!" she yelled. She pitched the bikes to the side of the road and took us home, cold, wet, and shivering. My sister was crying. "I'm sorry, you too. But why in the hell didn't you just ask one of the neighbors to let you in?" The truth was because we both thought Mom would be there sooner and didn't want to worry her if she couldn't find us. But instead, I didn't know. ____. I inherited the old 1972 Buick Skylark with my driver's license. What this meant was that Mom didn't need to wake up at the crack of dawn to make the 1-hour drive all the way to Denver and Regis. While most 16-year-old kids were giddy with excitement and a new car with a bow on top, I found myself in a decaying old car that was affectionately coined the Rust Mobile. Chicago's salted roads in the 70s added to the numerous rust stains and decay on the Buick's body. With only an AM radio to keep me company on the drive, I was straining to see the road during the blizzard of '82. Crackles of Neil Diamond's Sweet Caroline with intermittent static followed the old Buick as we rose higher into the mountains. The wiper blades crunching as they passed over frozen chunks of ice from being sprayed by faster-moving traffic, having the luxury of four-wheel drive. Assholes. I thought as they scooted past as if there was no snow on the highway at all. Interstate 70 looked like a wagon trail with snow piled on either side of the car and only the ruts from other cars' tires to follow. I was locked into my lane with snow building on the windshield and a small peephole where the wipers were still effective. When the wipers were no longer effective, I'd crank the window down with one arm while trying to stay in my lane, then reach outside into the snow and cold and grab the wiper before it reversed direction and snap it, trying to break the ice and snow free from the rubber. The lights of other cars in front paced me. I maintained a farther distance than normal because each time we slowed, I need to accelerate, causing the rear-wheel drive driven by a massive 350 V8 engine to spin the rear tires and fishtail up the highway. This became so routine, fishtailing up I-70, it felt weird when it didn't. The snow would only get worse in Evergreen, but the dirt dumped on the road from dump trucks would add just enough traction to keep the car moving forward. Slowly, the windows iced over and my defroster blowing at full blast to keep that little hole of visibility open. It was commutes like this that made me really hate my license. Exhausted and quite frankly surprised and proud that I made it this far. I made the turn home from my old bus stop and prepared for the impossible climb to our house. The dirt roads were completely covered in snow. There were no maintenance vehicles here to help. It was just me and the old Rust Mobile. I accelerated, spinning the rear tires and fishtailing to get up as much speed as I could, because that first hill was steep. The tires chewed their way down to the dirt. You could hear the high-pitched whining on the snow and ice and the crunching of the dirt, and the car slowly advanced up the hill and finally to the first flat part of the climb up. Same thing at the mailboxes, where the horse, lonely now because I never stopped to pet him anymore, another flat spot to accelerate around the corner and up the hill, past our hiking trail, into the final steep pitch. Now the hard part, the last pitch up to the driveway. If I could reach the driveway, I was home. A sharp turn to the right, pressing down on the accelerator, tires whining and spinning, and oh yeah, the neighbors here paved the road so no dirt. Fishtailing left and right, and countersteering the heavy Buick, testing the limits of the road width. The driveway getting closer, but the car could no longer climb. Shit, I said to myself, and backed down the single-lane road. If I backed far enough, there was another driveway I could back up to, try and get as far up as possible, and use the little advantage I could to build up speed and try and get to our driveway. The car roared, wheels spun, fishtailing, trying to point the nose up the hill, our driveway getting close, and the car went as far as it could. I wouldn't get the car home today, or perhaps for the next week, as the snow had no intention of stopping. I found a spot to ditch the car, grabbed my books, and walked the remaining quarter-mile. My tennis shoes and corduroy pants were wet with snow from the walk home. The garage door was open with Mom's new 1980 Subaru, with 4WD, parked safely inside. I shook my head. Dad's Ford F-250 parked outside with heavily treaded snow tires, collected snow. I stomped my wet shoes as I came into the house. The door creaked open, and I slammed it shut, acknowledging both my arrival and my frustration. "Oh good, you're home," I heard Mom say in the kitchen. Our home interior was finished and very spacious, yet cozy. I walked through the open living room with high vaulted ceilings and a cozy wood-burning stove in the corner. Mom spent days walking down the hill and collecting rocks to use as the stove's protective backdrop. She'd fit these together like nature's puzzle. Moss-covered granite added a warm texture to this otherwise big room. 3 steps up from there, the kitchen, Mom's favorite spot, was designed into a rounded hexagon with 2-story windows facing west to the Rockies. In the middle of the kitchen, a bar with stools and gas-burning stove in the center. This kitchen was the height of luxury. "Hey, Mom," I said, walking in. "Paul, look at the ad I found in the Canyon Courier." Mom greeted my dragging tired ass and wet books. She excitedly showed me the ad. I had thought maybe Steve had changed his to Gigolo for hire, but instead I read, "Wanted, SKI instructors, Geneva Basin ski area. Looking for enthusiastic, experienced skiers to join our instruction team. Full and part-time positions available. Must work well with children and adults. Previous teaching experience preferred, but not required. Training provided for qualified candidates. Trials in person at Geneva Basin ski area located 6 miles south of Georgetown on Guanella Pass Road, or call 303-569-3221. Starting wage, $4.25 per hour plus benefits. Season runs December through March. Weekend availability required. Free pass." "Oh, Mom," I complained. "I barely made it home today. I'll never make it to a ski area." "I thought about that," she said. "You can drive the Subaru. It has 4-wheel drive." She glistened. "Anytime you even mention the Subaru, it's got 4-wheel drive followed like a 1950s Tupperware marketing campaign. It's got fresh lock." And she waved off the discouraged look in my eyes. "You were on the ski team. And look, free pass. Think how much better you'll get." I pulled off my wet shoes. I have enough going on with school. You're good with kids, she pressed on, that familiar look in her eye that meant she'd already decided this was happening. Now that you're not doing a lot of magic shows, you'll have plenty of time to ski. It'll be fun, she said, rolling dough. I might not win this one, but fresh baked bread was in the works. I don't know. But even as I said it, I could feel myself considering it. Not because she was convincing me, but because maybe it could be fun. There's no guarantee. It's a trial, and I'm only an okay skier. I said, imagine getting paid to ski, she said, sliding the paper closer to me. Better than sitting home all weekend playing that Atari. I doubted that. I picked up the ad, pretending to study it while actually watching her victory smile spread. I'll think about it. Good, because I already called. You're enrolled in the ski instructor trials next Saturday. Mom! _____. Geneva Basin was a small, local ski area with 2 chair lifts and 2 Poma lifts. But while the ski area wasn't an Aspen or a Vale, it was a good place to ski. Its base elevation was one of the highest, and the snow was always good. Since only a handful of skiers patroni Geneva Basin, you were assured that the lift lines were short and the trails wide open. My mom's Subaru had absolutely no power. Where's the engine? I thought. Compared to the V8, this was pathetic, but hey, it has 4-wheel drive. I wound up the final stretch to Geneva Basin climbing at a paltry 20 miles per hour with the pedal to the floor, a twisting road with steep snowy switchbacks until the ski area came into sight. Cute, I thought. I'm sure I wouldn't get the job, but at least I'd have fun skiing. Walking into the small, warming hut, a man at a table welcomed me in. Here for the instructor tryouts? He asked. Yeah. Name? He asked. Paul Gallas. Galles, like Dallas, but spelled with a G. Ah, here you are? He circled my name and handed me a ticket. Your mother is quite the character, he said with a deadpan voice. I rolled my eyes, don't I know it, and smiled. He laughed. She was pretty adamant that you'd get the job. I'll do my best, sir. I returned, looking forward to see its son. I walked to take a seat with the other candidates. The familiar sounds of ski boots thumping on the wooden floors, snaps from buckles, and the melodic banter from skiers sharing their passion with others. I liked skiing and I was good at it, but it wasn't my love. That would come in the form of 2 wheels later on. But today I was here and ready to showcase my experience. The shiny silver helmet was retired years ago, but my free-flailing ski style remained. All right, hot doggers, pay attention. This is what we're going to do. The guy who checked my name called out. I'm Rick, and I run the ski school here at Geneva Basin. First thing you should know, we're not looking for Olympic athletes. We're looking for people who can teach, who can make skiing fun. He paced in front of us, his ski boots clunking on the wooden floor. There are 8 positions total, 4 for the adult program, 4 for children. But don't think of this as a competition. Think of it as a chance to show us your love for skiing and how you'd share that with others. Rick paused, looking around the room. Today isn't about who can ski the fastest or tackle the toughest runs. It's about control, patience, and most importantly, how you interact with each other. Because if you can't work as a team, he grinned, well, you've never tried to wrangle 20 excited kids on their first day of ski school. A few knowing chuckles rippled through the room. All right, grab your gear and meet me at the chairlift. And remember, have fun out there. That's what Geneva Basin is all about. We all got up, zippers zipping, boots snapping, and clunking plastic boots to the front door and outside. I stood by the chairlift along with about 25 other skiers. Looks like I wasn't the only one who thought, to hell with it, it's a free lift ticket. Rick elegantly slid up to the group of skiers. He looked relaxed and very natural in his skis. You really could tell if they were good skiers by the way they stood. Just so we don't come home with torn hamstrings, we're going to warm up. We always warm up, right, skiers? Rick shouted and started leading us into a warm-up routine that involved side-stepping up the hill, knee bends into a snow plow, one ski up and stretching the hamstrings, pole plant with a twist, ankle flexing, and a few more. Exactly what we did every night on my ski team. Okay, let's head up the hill and wait at the top, he shouted. The chair swung around the outside of the motorized wheel, and I sat down. Skis up, and soon we were gliding up the hill. I pretended that I was an airplane. Flight 1620 cleared for flight level 18. The view was always beautiful, turning back to look at the ski lodge get smaller and the horizon get larger. Cars parked in the distance, and the contrast between blue skies and white mountains made these trips up the hill very special. "Hi, I'm Todd," the man next to me said. "I'm Paul," I said. We talked timidly at first, comparing our ski experiences and where we lived and what we did. I told him I lived in Evergreen and went to Regis in Denver. He told me his story, and according to him, he was very advanced. "I'd give myself a 9 out of 10, he said. "I learned how to ski a couple of years ago. Wish I could go more, but the damn price of tickets these days, you know?" Yeah, I agreed. To be honest, I never paid for a ticket in my life, but I wasn't sharing that detail. We floated over the trees. The slopes were devoid of any skiers. We'd be cutting the first tracks of the day. The top of the hill arrived, ski tips up, and I casually glided to the other skiers waiting while my new friend had trouble with the dismount, crossing his tips and falling. "Aw shit," he exclaimed. Turns out, Todd was a terrible skier, and he soon realized his 9 out of 10 was more like a 4. But I liked him. After our first run down, just a warm-up run, we met again at the bottom of the hill. Our instructions: go back up and wait for more instruction. So, Todd and I got back on the lift. "You guys are really good," he said. "Maybe I'm not a 9 after all. I'm thinking a 7 or 8. Rick said to just have fun. I encouraged him. "Just try to relax. You were stiff." "Yeah, probably nervous." He had a gruff voice, like someone who smoked a pack a day. He was older, in his 40s, so old, prehistoric even. He wasn't prepared for a day of skiing, blue jeans and a jean jacket. His gloves were thin, goggles yellowed and scratched that would leave a red ring around his face. I was keeping my legs moving, swinging them back and forth. "Swing your legs, Todd, it helps." I said. He followed my instructions, and soon we were up the hill, Rick waiting for all of us. "All right, ski bums, this trip down, I want to ski to that barrel down there. Do you all see it?" he asked. "Good. From here to there, all I want you to do is pizza and French fries." For those of you who don't know what that means, pizza is a snow plow and French fries are parallel skis. "Got it?" he asked. The group nodded. "I'll demonstrate. When I stop, take turns coming down the hill. Give each other 5 seconds. Rick started down the hill calling out, "Pizza, French fries, pizza, French fries." His voice quieted the further he got. He was really smooth. But pizza and French fries? I thought this would be hard. The group started down one by one, then Todd, then me. Todd was really struggling. He was going too slow. His pizza and French fries were indiscernible. His but was sticking far back, and his turns were slow and painful to watch. I caught up to him and got behind him. "Todd," I yelled, "I'm going to pass you, and I want you to do what I do." "All right." His harsh voice quivered, concentrating on trying to get down the hill. I got in front of him. "Follow my tracks. Put your weight on the downhill ski, and when I tell you, wedge your skis together and take that weight off." We ran parallel to the slope. "French fries," and skied across. "Now pizza." Stay relaxed, weight on that downhill ski. "Now begin the turn, shifting your weight a little bit. Follow my skis." I turned, he followed. Finally, the last 2 down, we arrived to Rick's disappointment. "A little quicker next time, fellas, all right?" Well, that was it for me. I totally blew it. Instead of showing that I could ski, I was lumbering down the hill like a turtle. Each time down the hill, Rick gave a new set of instructions. No poles, loose bindings, one ski, etc. Most of the things I had done during ski team practice. We added a few bumps to ski on, a few poles to slalom around until the trials were just about done. Our last ride to the top, Rick organized us and gave his final instructions. "All right, powder hounds. This time we have a camera at the bottom of the hill recording you, so don't fuck up or you'll forever be immortalized. I want you to ski well, ski aggressively, show us what you've got. You can play it safe and go down the smooth stuff or tackle the bumps in the middle. I don't care how you get down. We will review the footage back in the lodge." As usual, Rick went down first and we each followed, giving each a few second gap. I started my run down, built up speed, and crisscrossed the slope. Not sure what to do exactly, just ski. The wind built up as my speed increased, mouth and face feeling the bite of the cold air. I crossed into the bumps, popped over a handful, then back to the smooth side, built up speed. I eyeballed another bump and hit it fast, lifting me into the air, landed perfectly on the following bump following the natural flow of each, rounding one, landing on another, and sliding through the troughs each created. Before I knew it, I saw the camera at the bottom of the hill, skied up to it, gave it a wave and a quick hockey stop, and my run was over. We all filed into the warming hut and grabbed a spot to sit at the long tables. Woohoos! And that was fun, resonated in the room. Hot food was prepared in the cafeteria, so I went and grabbed a hamburger. It was probably the best goddamn burger I ever had. I was tired and drained. All right, snow bunnies, Rick yelled over the crowd. Hope you had fun, be nice to each other, and watch your skiing. He stepped away as the V's rolled, and we gathered closer to the 25-inch TV. The footage was grainy, typical for home video, but clear enough to see each skier's form. Some carved elegant S-patterns down the slope. Others tackled the bumps with varying degrees of success. A few oohs and supportive claps followed particularly good runs. Poor Todd's descent drew a few sympathetic murmurs. His jean-clad figure moved cautiously down the hill, his pizza wedge never quite transforming into French fries. Then came a run that grabbed everyone's attention. The skier attacked the slope with a fluid confidence, moving naturally between the smooth sections and the bumps. When they hit that series of moguls, flowing from one to the next like they were dancing, the room filled with murmurs of appreciation. Look at that transition, someone said. Who is that? Asked another. Nice air on that bump, came another voice. I was watching intently, admiring whoever this skilled skier was, when the figure approached the camera, waved, and did that hockey stop. My jaw dropped. Wait, that was me? Several heads turned my way, expressions ranging from surprise to respect. I felt my face flush. I hadn't realized I looked that good on skis. Somehow, all those hours in the silver helmet and on the ski team had turned into something that actually impressed these adults. The remaining runs played out, but I was still processing what I'd seen. That confident skier on the screen seemed like a stranger, not the skinny kid who'd spent the day worrying about helping Todd down the hill, nor the kid who was afraid of his shadow only a few short years ago. After the video played out and ended with VHS static, Rick came up and made an announcement. All right, hammerheads, we are going to separate into two groups. If you hear your name called, head downstairs. If you don't, you can stay up here. He continued. Greg McCarthy, Sarah Jensen, Michael Chun, Jake Wilson, Lisa Martinez, David Cooper, Paul Gallas, James Anderson. We grabbed our gear, and our boots thundered down the steel stairs into the basement. It was colder down there. We all looked at each other. What does this mean? We're the first to be cut. It's obvious. Jake said, his name tag said Jake, I'm not my sister. I hope not, Lisa said. She was one of the good skiers. I was surprised that she didn't make it. They probably want more experience, Michael added, fidgeting with his goggles. I saw how Rick watched your run, Greg said to Lisa. You nailed those moguls. Sarah brushed snow off her jacket. Did anyone notice if they were writing things down? I couldn't tell if they liked my run or not. I saw Rick nodding during yours, Jim said, but he didn't sound convinced of his own observation. A few moments restlessly waiting, the clanking noise of boots descending the metal stairs. First we saw the boots, then the legs, jacket and Greg's face, smiling. Welcome to Geneva Basin, he said with a smile. You might not have noticed, but your names are on the lockers behind you. Open yours up. He pointed. I opened my locker to see a ski jacket with the Geneva Basin logo on it. On the top shelf, a pin that said Paul Gallas Ski Instructor, and a Geneva Basin water bottle and cup cozy. I tried on my jacket and it fit like a glove, my first uniform, and it was pretty damn cool. _____. I arrived home, excited, wearing my ski jacket the entire 2-hour drive from the ski area. Ran into the house. Mom, I got the job. I know you did, honey, she said calmly, cutting slices from the cake she made. I baked you a cake to celebrate, she said, smiling, handing me a piece. German chocolate, your favorite. ____. I only taught at Geneva Basin for that one season. The paychecks never really materialized. The ski area was struggling and would close its doors not long after. But I learned something valuable during my time there, especially about working with kids. Like the day one of my young students lost control on the bunny hill, heading straight for the Poma lift line at full speed. I taught them all to fall if they couldn't stop, but this one forgot everything in his panic. I managed to ski up behind him, straddle his skis with mine, grab him around the waist, and somehow snowplowed us to a stop, but not before sailing over the tips of several very startled skiers' equipment. The look of relief on the kid's face nearly made up for the heart attack I'd just had. That night, eating Mom's cake, I didn't know that Geneva Basin would soon be gone, or that bigger changes were coming at home. My parents' marriage was unraveling, and no amount of snow plowing could control that descent. ____. The year at Regis was uneventful despite my Spanish teacher. Unfortunately, I didn't have Mrs. Clarkson. I had Father Hernandez. Father Hernandez tried to be the cool teacher, cracking jokes, usually at the expense of other students. "Mr. Clark, did your mother dress you this morning? Comb your hair." Or, "Mr. Simmons, stop shifting in the chair. Do you need to go pee?" Or, "Mr. Mice, nice catch at the game last night." He had his favorites. I wasn't one of them. My prepubescent years struck facial anomalies I couldn't control, like a giant pus-filled zit growing in my nose. While we were working on our vocabulary words, I went up to him to ask a question. He looked up at me and grimaced. "Mr. Gallas, that thing is disgusting. Get it away from me." The class shuffled uncomfortably, realizing that he had broken an unwritten code of conduct. The fathers were pretty much immune from anything, and despite my complaints, I remained in his class. Then there was Father Pilgrim, nicknamed Father Touch Me. Yeah, I look back now and realize how fucked up that was. He was my theology teacher, first period, a big man with a big belly, tall and balding. His voice was deep and commanding. I arrived a few minutes late for class, and he told me to stay after class. Oohs and ahs from the class, and his bellowing voice. "Quiet. This is between me and Mr. Gallas, and none of your business. Grow up. You are all in high school. Not children. Act that way." The class came to attention immediately, and he continued with his lesson. After the bell rang, I did as instructed, and Father Pilgrim said, "Paul, come here." He stood up from behind his desk and closed the remaining distance between the two of us. Towering above me, he wrapped me in his two powerful arms, squeezing me into his oversized belly. My face squished into his chest. I could make out with one eye his black jacket and the chalkboard. "Paul, Paul, you are loved. You realize that, don't you?" His voice resonating from his chest, my other ear silenced by his large hand covering it. "God loves you, your parents love you, and I love you." I heard his stomach digesting breakfast beneath his voice. "Here at Regis, this is not your old high school where choices mean nothing. Here there are consequences. You must take responsibility for your choices. You understand that, don't you?" He asked. MHMMFFFF. I couldn't say much else. "God watches you all day, and you can't escape what he sees." He said, "I have spoken with the other teachers here, and we are very concerned about your well-being. We understand your difficulties." He bellowed. "What difficulty?" I thought. "And we have all decided to keep a sharp eye on you, young man." The echo from his chest bellowed. "So, you won't be able to fool any of us. Don't be late. Get the work done that you must get done, and follow our directions, and everything will be fine," he said, finally releasing his embrace. "Now, get to your next class, and don't be late again." He smiled and sat back at his desk. I was never late again. The year ended and summer began in Evergreen, Colorado. My friendship with Steve was strong, but my friendship with Brian was lost as a result of the gossip circles between Mom and her Evergreen friends. They had feuded with Goldie, Brian's mom, and came to their own conclusion that Brian's brother was a drug dealer. I never saw his brother. On my behalf, Mom decided to end my relationship with Brian, and I never saw him again. "That sucks," Steve said after I told him of Mom's decisions. "You can drive your own car. Why not just go see him?" Last I heard, Goldie is pissed at Mom, and she doesn't want Brian to see me either, I said. Steve shook his head and set up Gunslinger, the psychedelic furs playing on the stereo. Mom had been getting more distant lately, her time spent with Joyce increasing, and the vitriolic rhetoric I'd overheard while they were talking about their husbands. "I don't even know why women want to get married these days," she'd say. "We're in college, we have careers, not like in the old days." What are men good for? I felt her influence grow, and being a man myself now, at 17 years old, their disappointment in my gender stuck, but only some faraway place in the back of my mind that was being sheltered by my demon. Curiosity hit me when on my dad's birthday, she had presented him with a gift that seemed out of the realm of her other gifts, a brand new Moto Became Grand Tour bicycle. One he had been eyeballing and trying to convince Mom that they should both get one and go camping with. He'd stroke the saddlebags on display at the store and let his mind drift into fantasy about the two of them taking grand adventures together. But she'd shut him down. It's too expensive and we have a house to finish. Stop dreaming. And roll her eyes. So, to find this bike in the living room with all but a bow on it surprised the hell out of me. It also surprised Dad. He gleefully accepted the gift with little hearts forming in his eyes and bubbles percolating from his head like a Disney animation of love. "It's so light," he said. "Look, I'm picking it up with one finger." The Reynolds 530 steel was no joke. Dad had soon accessorized his new bike with cycling gloves and an oversized bell helmet that Mom teased him about. "Are you planning on riding the Tour de France? What do you need gloves for? Or a helmet for that matter?" To some degree, she was right. Dad was more interested in looking the part of a cyclist than protecting himself. I also found myself admiring his new bike. It was so much lighter than mine. I had inherited his old cast iron Schwinn, and nothing I could do would elevate it to the modern machine he now had. The few trips Dad and I took into town, 5 miles down Upper Bear Creek, for coffee, always left me gasping and feeling like my sister trying to keep up with me. So, that summer, I gathered my magic money and bought a new bike. Wheat Ridge Cyclery specialized in Moto Became bikes, and in one visit, I eagerly handed over $150 for the Grand Sport. The Grand Sport was more svelte than the Grand Tour, lighter and racier. The salesperson convinced me of this bike and its capabilities. 5 gears in the back, center shifters and components, a leather saddle, vinyl handlebar tape, and all mine. I made a deal with my mom. If I bought a new bike, I would have to buy a helmet and gloves too. Steve looked at me, popped open the bag of Doritos, dipped one into the bean dip. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded and rolled a 2d10 for damage. Richard Butler's Love My Way droning on, his scratchy, nasally British voice over the cacophony of electric guitar and synth was a new sound that I wasn't used to. Steve was quickly falling in love with this music after having inherited a record collection from his dad. "This is the best music ever," he exclaimed. I was yet to be convinced. "Listen to this." He put on "Oh No, It's Devo," and this new synthetic song started playing like some robotic AI version of what music should sound like. "Peek Boo" and "Ha Ha Ha HAA." "What the hell are we listening to?" I asked. "Your shot just blew the guy's head off." He said, "This is Devo. They've been around since the 70s. Why I haven't heard this till now pisses me off." He said, "I've been missing out." "Yeah, it's different for sure." I said, "But where's the poetry, the meaning? It's all nonsense." "Are you kidding?" "Oh, Paul, you gotta stop listening to Barbra Streisand. That music will indoctrinate you into simplicity and rot your brain. All the silly love this and love that. La la la." He sang, mocking my record collection. "Peek Boo" is a social commentary about how consumerism and capitalism controls us, and we don't even know it. We're like babies who think reality is defined by only what we see, and when we are subjugated into control, they just laugh at us. "Ha ha, HAA." I sang. The music was catchy, and we started singing together. "So put your hands on your face and cover up your eyes." A pause, and we looked at each other, Doritos on the bed making his white sheets orange. "Ha ha, HA." We growled and roared with laughter. A knock came on his door. "Steve?" It was Catherine. "Go away," Steve yelled. "Paul's dad is on the phone," she said from behind the door. "Take a message," Steve yelled. "Hurry up, Paul," she said, and walked back upstairs. "Ah, what does he want this time?" I asked, working my way off the bed, swiping Dorito crumbs off from where I'd sat. Whenever Dad was in town, we were supposed to be at home. Mom always set our schedules so that when he was home, his family would be there for him. She'd say, "Dad works every day and is gone 4 days out of the week. The least you guys could do is be there for him when he gets back." But now at 17 with a car and a bike, I was out and about much more lately. Shit, this was just another attempt at family time. I walked upstairs, Catherine on the sofa in jeans and a t-shirt that showed off her breasts. Shit. I continued to the kitchen. The phone was dangling on its cord, slightly swinging. Yeah, Dad? I asked. Paul, I need you to come home, he said emotionlessly. Aw, Dad, can it wait? I'm in the middle of something. Your mom moved out, he said. Silence. I could hear his breathing. No other commands, no requests. Nothing from the other side of the phone. What? I asked. When, how? We're getting a divorce. Come home. He hung up, and the phone went quiet. I hung it up in disbelief. What did I just hear? Am I really that surprised? I walked out of the kitchen. Catherine glanced at me and back at the TV. I lumbered back down to Steve's room and plopped on the bed. My legs gave way to gravity, and the bed bounced, its springs squeaking. Over big country, Steve asked. What? Shit. I said again. Dad called. Him and Mom are getting a divorce. That sucks, Steve said while eating a Dorito. My parents divorced a long time ago. The reason why we moved to Evergreen. He said. It's not so bad, just sucks when Mom remarried to the asshole upstairs, pointing up to the ceiling. He meant Claude, the guy who became a pseudo-stepdad. I mean, I still have a dad, I just don't see him much, and Claude just wants to try and step in and make all the rules. Steve's mom and Claude always seemed like the parents in Charlie Brown cartoons, droning away and never really heard. Well, anyway, Steve, I'd better go home and see what's up. He's probably just exaggerating. I said. Good luck, Paul. Want a chip? He reached one out. For the road. I drove home in a stunned silence. The Rust Mobile bounced its way along the winding Bear Creek Road, passing expensive homes with glimpses of the river behind rock walls. The old abandoned hotel a few miles up that had no reason to be there. It was large and I'm sure had a lot of activity, now an empty shell of what was a time gone past. I got home and Dad was waiting on the couch, Happy Days on the TV, making noises. He wasn't paying attention to it, consumed by his thoughts and disbelief of what his life turned into. This large house, for years of life, surrounding him, now like an empty shell. The walls, high ceilings, paddle fans on top soothingly circulating the air. The finished oak stairs, meticulously shaped and sanded and stained, now going nowhere. The large windows set into large walls that fell over in the night, now staring into a sunset that held no value whatsoever. Dad's arms hung loose. His arms had always been strong, well-veined, his hands rugged from hard work and determination, now looked lifeless. Hey, Dad, I said, walking in. You okay? He was silent and still. I walked up to him, put my hand on his shoulder. You okay? I asked again. He shook his head. No, he said. There was a thoughtful pause. He took a deep breath and sighed. We need to leave tonight, he said. Mom and Chris are staying at Joyce's tonight. He said, I can't stay here. I made a reservation at a hotel in Denver. Mom wants me to leave. He tried to sound dispassionate, controlling his sorrow, his brain, I think, short-circuited because I couldn't feel any emotion from him. I packed a bag with some underwear and a change of clothes, threw it in his truck, and the engine started. The lights of the home were glowing under the dark starlit sky as Dad put the truck in gear and drove down the driveway, hand cut by him, hauled by this truck. I looked behind me, and soon the forest swallowed the lights of the home and disappeared into oblivion. ____. Looking back to this moment 40 years later, I won't be precise. I had to make a choice. I could either move with Dad or stay with Mom. Your first instinct might make you believe that the choice was easy, stay with Mom. But you'd be wrong. During many late-night conversations, Mom had often foreshadowed this choice. She'd tell me that she wanted me to stay with Dad because I haven't had a chance to get to know him, and she wanted me to get to know him. When I broke the news to her that I decided to live with Dad, I threw myself under the bus, insisting that I was following my own selfish interests over our relationship. I'd sacrifice my integrity in order to preserve her goodness. I said, you have the love, but Dad has the money. Mom has never forgiven me for that, and that's exactly what I wanted. I knew how guilty she felt and how horrible a person she believed herself to be, abandoning her family and tearing down the accomplishments that we had worked so hard to build, not just the house, but also our slow recovery from the death of my brother. I wanted her to know that my love for her wouldn't end with this choice, and that she didn't need to also feel guilty by separating me from my father. By making it about money, I gave her a reason to be angry with me rather than herself. Better she think I was materialistic than believe she had driven me away. So, I said what I said, and she remembers every word and reminds me of it often. Chapter 7.